If they were wise, they would have said no.
Excuse me. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the month for the Board of Adjustment in Portsmouth. We have a miscellaneous schedule this evening. I have an announcement first in case if it's of use to anybody right off the bat here, and that the 53 Green Street project, which is on our agenda for this evening, will not be heard this evening because it is on hold, not withdrawn, not postponed. It's on hold because the parties have agreed amongst themselves to take it to court. That doesn't mean it can't come back to this board, which it may. So I would recommend that all of us on the board keep all the materials that we've assembled over the months, just in case that is the outcome. But as of right now, it's on hold. So I apologize for the late notice, but Mr. Stith gave me the notice as quickly as he could this afternoon, and that's where we are on that particular item. So moving on to the other items on the agenda. The first item is the election of a vice chair. And I'd be open to nominations. Ms. Eldridge?
I would like to nominate Jim Lee. He has experience. His life is property, land, real estate, and I think he would be a very good co-chair.
All right, thank you. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Apparently not. Okay, nominations are closed. We'll take a vote on that election. I'm going to pass on Mr. Lee, but
Did you accept the nomination?
he was grinning. I took that.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
I'll be shameless and vote for myself.
You should.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rossi?
I vote for.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you, Ms. Lee, for agreeing to take on the challenge here. Okay.
I lost my seat, maybe.
So moved. So I'm done.
Okay, Stephen.
And the good news is you're going to get to sit in the chair, just so, little heads up, very soon, this evening.
Oh, boy.
Okay. The next item of business, and I guess before we do this, I should announce the general ground rules. Oh, good, Mr. McDonald's here, thank you. Good. The way we conduct our business is that the applicant presents to the board comments on it, asks questions if necessary. We open the public hearing. The speakers in favor speak first. The speakers against speak next. And then we have a call for 2, 4, or against, and then the hearing is closed and we take a vote. Now we ask that the presenters limit themselves to 15 minutes, and if necessary, ask that isn't sufficient. We ask them to request an additional 5 minutes before they begin to speak. That's important, and the board will vote that request up or down. Secondly, when other speakers come up, 2, 4, or against, 4 or against, we ask them to make their comments within 5 minutes. And then when we get to the 2, 4, or against, which is the last round, we don't have a time limit, but we ask the people to be conscious of everyone's time and stick strictly to the main points of the argument. And if it strays too far off, I'll have to ask you to wrap up your comments within a couple of minutes. So that's how we do things. And I'd like to ask Mr. Stith if he would address the Zoom aspect of our meeting. Mr. Stith.
Sure, thank you. For those participating on the Zoom call, if you would like to speak to an application, first wait till the public comment portion of the meeting is before us, and then you can use the raise hand icon on the Zoom feature to indicate that you would like to speak, and wait for the chair to call on you, and we will unmute you so you can make your comments.
Thank you very much. Okay. Excuse me. Having done that, let's move to the second item on the agenda, which is the approval of minutes of the last meeting, which was January 18 this year, 22. Do we have any comments, corrections, questions about those minutes? Any? And if not, I have one fairly minor. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Margison? Yes.
Yes, it says that it references this meeting as being held on February 2nd, 2022.
Yes.
So.
Yes, thank you.
And other than wanting to make myself sound more articulate than I am, I think that's the only correction I have. It's like, yikes.
Anybody else? Okay, I had one picky comment, and it's on page 6, in the third paragraph down, the third to the last line, the last word and this is from Mr. Rossi, I believe. The word relegated doesn't seem to fit within that sentence. Mr. Rossi, can you get at what I'm pointing at and tell us what I don't think that was probably the word you used.
I did not use that word. Of course, at this point in time, I don't remember exactly what I said, but the gist of what I was asking is whether the owners knew that it had been maybe designated or agreed to, that it was not to be further developed.
Okay, yeah, no, I figured from the context that that's what it was. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Stith to check back with Ms. Brault, Joanne, who does a wonderful job on these, to check back against the tape.
Sure.
And put the appropriate word in there. Thank you. Anybody else? She did her usual fine job on these minutes. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes with that minor change?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Second on the motion to approve the minutes? Second, Ms. Eldridge, thank you. Those in favor, voice vote will do.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye? Aye. Okay, thank you. Done. Next. We move to old business. Item A reads as follows. Matthew Beal and Heidi Medlin, please correct my pronunciation if that's wrong. 242 Leslie Drive, request a one-year extension to the variance for dimensional standards granted on February 24th, 2020. Is there any discussion on this? If not, is there a motion? Ms. Margison?
I would move to grant the extension. The zoning ordinance allows for a one-year extension as long as the application is made before the expiration.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and the memo explained their situation. Is there a second to that motion, please? Yes, Ms. Margin, Ms. Eldridge, thank you. Okay, any discussion on the motion? If not, I would like to, let me call the roll. This is to make that the official request to postpone them. Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Rossi,
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge,
Yes.
Ms. Margison.
Yes.
Mr. McDonald's here, yes?
Yes.
And Mr. Mantle.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, thank you all. That's done. Okay, let's move along. We've already made the announcement, I'll make it again, regarding the 53 Green Street project, which has been before this board since about August, I think, quite a long time anyway. The parties are choosing to take it out of our hands at the moment and take the issue to court. So therefore, it is put on hold as of right now. And again, I just request that everybody keep their material that's been provided to us on that question in case it comes back to us. So that takes care of old business. Excuse me. Let's let's move on to new business. The, oh, I'm sorry. Going too fast here. The next item is item C, and this on, I have to recuse on this, so, Mr. Lee, nothing like right out of the box here. You want?
If he wants to stay there.
Do you want to, are you more comfortable just staying there?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Is he far enough away?
What's that?
Is he far enough away?
Oh, yes.
All right, so item C on the agenda is a request of Evan C. Maloney and Jill Maloney, owners, and Duncan McCollum, applicant, for the property located at 39 Lincoln Avenue, requesting an equitable waiver of variance for approval of a previously constructed treehouse, which requires the following. One, a variance or equitable waiver from section 10.573.20 to allow a 0-foot rear yard where 8 feet is required and a 5-foot left side yard where 8 feet is required. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 135, Lot 17, and lies within the General Residence A, GRA District, LU-21-213. And who is here to speak to this application?
Good evening. My name is Duncan McCallum. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicants, Evan and Jill Maloney, who live at 389 Lincoln Avenue. As the Vice Chair just mentioned, what we were seeking this evening is a variance allowing them to basically allow a treehouse to remain where it is, even though it would otherwise be in violation of the setback requirements. It's required to be 8 feet, 8 feet from the 8 feet from both the front, from both the rear and side property lines, and instead of that, it is sitting right on the back property line, and it is within about 8 feet of the side property line. So we're asking for a variance or variances, or in the alternative, an equitable waiver to allow the treehouse where it is because it has already been built. Now, the background is as follows. My clients, the Maloneys, bought their property in October of 2020, and after they got settled in sometime in the spring or early summer of 2021, they decided that they wanted to build a recreational area for their 8-year-old son in the left rear of the property where they had ample space in which to do it. So they hired a landscaper and a designer to look over the property and see what could be done. And the designer, in addition to recommending some child's teepees and some other playthings, she recommended a tree house. There are other tree houses in the area. She sold them on the proposition that that would be quite a quaint idea, and so they decided that they would adopt her suggestion and build a tree house in the rear. They hired a contractor who was experienced. He's reputed. His name is John Ratchek. You will be hearing from him later on in the evening. He has built tree houses all over Portsmouth and all over the Seacoast area. I want to emphasize that in this regard, my clients, the Maloneys, were relying on professionals. The designer has about 5 years experience. I shouldn't say 5 years experience. She has been self-employed for 5 years as a designer and has experience. Her husband is a landscaper. And as I just mentioned, the contractor who was actually going to build the treehouse has built them all over the city. Now, a fact that I didn't include in my statement of facts in my memorandum, which I didn't include it because I didn't think it was necessary, but it's sort of become appropriate because I've seen some of the letters that some of the residents of the town have been writing in. My clients contacted their neighbors ahead of time and told them what they were going to do, asked them if it was okay, and asked for their input. They actually brought some of their direct neighbors. They brought them onto their property. They showed them where the treehouse was going to be put, and they explained what they were going to do. And at the time, the neighbors said, "That's fine. That's fine." The contractor, whom you're going to be hearing from later on this evening, He spoke to them too, and he's going to tell you what his interaction with them consisted of. But the bottom line is, my clients and the contractor told the neighbors what they were going to do, and the ones that they spoke to said, it's fine. The rear neighbor, at his request, requested that a wooden screen be built in the back in the interests of privacy, and so my clients, the Maloneys, said, fine, we will do that, and they did it at their own expense. So that is the background, and I think in light of some of the correspondence that I've seen that's come in on this particular application, I think it's important to mention that. One of the neighbors who's now complaining even said it was fine at the time. So my clients were trying to be good citizens and do everything right. At some point, my client, Jill Maloney, was told by somebody, she heard from somebody, you're supposed to have a building permit, so she applied for a building permit. Then she heard from the building inspector who said, you don't need a building permit, you don't need one for this. According to the International Builders Code, it's not required because this is a structure. Now, at that point, you might have thought that if there was anything wrong with placing that tree house on that spot in the property where it stood, you might have thought that the building inspector would have mentioned it at that time, and instead he said nothing. There's nothing said about it violating any setback requirements. There was no mention of any setback requirements. He just said, you don't need a building permit, you're all set. So it came as kind of a rude surprise to my clients a couple of months later when they got a letter from a memo from Mr. Stith saying, you're in violation. If you've read my memo, you've seen the explanation. Mr. Stith said that, well, the International Building Code is one thing, but also what has to be taken into consideration is the zoning ordinance and its setback requirements. We submit that if that was the case, the building inspector should have mentioned it at that time. The design, once the news got back to them about this development, the designer and the contractor were shocked. I have a letter that I'd like to pass out to the members of the board from the designer, who isn't here tonight, in which she says in substance, she's been self-employed in this business for 5 years, and she's never previously had a problem like this. The contractor, who's going to speak for himself in a few minutes, will tell you the same thing, that he's never encountered this sort of problem, and it never occurred to him that this might be treated as a structure which required a setback requirement. So, moving on, what we are asking for this evening is an equitable waiver allowing the treehouse to stay where it is, or to, in the alternative, or perhaps in addition thereto, a variance. Now let's take the equitable waiver first. The doctrine of equitable waiver is something that I like to refer to as the doctrine of honest mistake. I like to use that term because I think it is more descriptive of what the doctrine actually is, and it promotes ease of understanding. The purpose of the doctrine is as in this case, if a structure is built, or if the property owner or his agents or lieutenants make a mistake in placing a structure at the wrong place, so that it is in violation of the setback requirements or any of the other dimensional requirements imposed by the zoning ordinance, and if the mistake was made in good faith, and if it's not doing any harm, the structure may be allowed to stay there. Well, in this case, it was a completely honest mistake. My clients were relying on experienced professionals to do the job right, and they had no reason to think otherwise. And again, you might have thought that if there was anything wrong with what they did and where their professionals were placing the treehouse, you might have thought the building inspector would have mentioned it. And so for that, I've outlined the criteria for the granting of an equitable waiver in my memorandum of law. and they are not difficult. They're not difficult to understand. The violation was not noticed or discovered until after the structure was substantially complete. That's true. It was an honest mistake. That's true. No diminution of value of the surrounding properties. I can't imagine how this could result in the diminution of any properties in the area. There are other tree houses in the neighborhood. And I haven't heard anybody complain so far that any of those other tree houses are causing a diminution in value of the property. And there is no evidence in this case to think that this one will. And there's a balancing test. That due to the degree of past construction or investment, the cost of correcting the mistake outweighs any public benefit which would be gained, and it would be inequitable, or in other words, more expensive than it's worth to require the violation to be corrected. So I submit that this particular situation meets all of these criteria, and an equitable waiver should be granted under the doctrine of honest mistake. In the alternative, we ask that a variance be granted. Again, I think this situation clearly meets all of the criteria for the variance, for the granting of a variance. The variance will not be contrary to the public interest. Well, obviously, it's not going to be contrary to the public interest because there are other tree houses in the neighborhood. Upon my instructions, my client went out one day when they were walking their dog, and they counted at least 10 tree houses in the neighborhood. And just the time it takes to walk a few blocks from their house, to walk the dog around the block. There are 10 other tree houses. So obviously, it is not contrary to the public interest because there are other tree houses in the same neighborhood. For much the same reason, it is not contrary to the spirit of the ordinance. When I think of these setback requirements, what I think they're intended primarily to prevent is big, large buildings on one property that sort of loom over the neighboring properties and cut off air, light, and space. Well, this treehouse doesn't do anything like that. It is basically just a deck with guardrails on it, and it's not acting in domineering fashion toward any of the other property owners. Substantial justice will be done by the granting of the variance. All that my clients are merely asking for is what at least 10 other people just within a 200-yard radius of their home have, which is other tree houses, and what people all over Portsmouth have. We have submitted pictures of, I will submit in a few moments some pictures of other tree houses that are in the same neighborhoods as my client. It would be an injustice to deny my clients the right to have a tree house, to have what all of these other property owners who have tree houses have. And by the way, most of these other tree houses hug the property line and violate the setback requirement just the way this one does. And so far, we haven't heard anybody else complaining about anybody else's tree house but my clients. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, I haven't heard anybody complain that any of the other tree houses are diminishing the value of their surrounding properties, and there's no reason to think this one will. Now we come to the hardship test. There must be special conditions. Well, in this case, the special condition is you can't move the trees. The trees are where they are. And it would be kind of funny to have a tree house with no tree. The trees in question, they sit at the edge of the property line. They were there for decades at the time that my clients moved in. And that is a special condition. It would be the only way you could comply, I suppose, is to move the trees. Well, obviously, that's not possible. And the only other alternative is to move the tree house at least 8 feet inside the property lines where it will be detached to the trees. And It will no longer be a treehouse. The use is reasonable. Again, dozens of other people in this neighborhood have tree houses. They are commonplace in the neighborhood. It will not be, can't be used in strict conformance of the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Again, because of the special conditions, the trees are where they are and they can't be moved. You can't move the trees, and you can't build a tree house in strict conformity with the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And finally, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the zoning provision in question, which is section 10.573 of the zoning ordinance, and the specific application of that principle that to the property. Again, I think that the general purpose of this particular section is to create elbow room between properties and property owners so that they're not overcrowding each other. In this case, again, I call it a treehouse, but basically what it is just a deck with guardrails around it, and it's not doing any harm. It's not overcrowding anybody's property. It's not a structure that's looming over the neighbors or invading their privacy, especially with the screen that my clients built that their rear neighbors requested. And so, for that reason, it is not, there's no substantial relationship between the zoning provision in question, and it is not being compromised. And finally, the Maloney son is not going to be 8 years old forever. The time is going to come when he's going to be more interested in cars and girls and the Red Sox than he is in playing in the treehouse. And at that point, my clients are going to be dismantling the treehouse and taking it down. So this is really just a very short-term thing, and I do not really see how anybody in good faith can complain. So for that reason, we submit all of the requirements for a variance are met, and we ask that it be granted. Are there any questions?
Any questions? Beth, Ms. Markson?
Yes, so we only have a snippet of the conversation between the building inspector and your client. Actually, Peter's on it a little bit, but was the building inspector under the impression that this treehouse was from a kit?
I don't know. I really don't know. If it is from a kit, I was not aware of it. All I know is the contractor, John, let me pronounce his last name correctly. John Ratchek is the person whom you will be hearing from, and you can ask them that question. I really don't know. I do not know the answer to that question.
You need, if you're going to talk, you need to come up to the podium.
No, she can't speak
Identify
right now.
yourself, please.
She cannot speak. Oh, she's the applicant, that's right.
Wait, I thought she was,
Come on.
She's the owner.
she's the owner.
I just wanted to say, yes, he knew it wasn't from a kit because when I spoke to him, we were talking about there's concrete.
Ma'am, could you identify yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Say-
Scott.
I should have done that. This is Jill Maloney.
I apologize.
That's all right. No problem.
Sorry about that. So when I spoke to the building inspector, we had discussed how it was put together, and I had explained how the builder, he was concerned that there's cement platforms, that they weren't in the ground, and I had explained to him that the builder had put them on top of the ground, so it wasn't really considered permanent, and that's how he decided that it was considered not a structure, and therefore he did know that it was done by a builder.
Okay.
So, thank you.
All right, thank you for clearing it up.
The other question I have is, were the setbacks discussed at any time between the building inspector and the?
Not a bit. The application was submitted. The inspector looked it over and did what he did. He said, you don't even need a permit for this.
But that's for the building inspector, that's not for the zoning regulation.
Well, again, we would have thought that he would, he's in the business. This is what he does. My understanding is the building inspector looks at the plans and decides whether or not it complies.
The thing I'm getting at here is that to get an equitable waiver, ignorance of the ordinance is not a defense. So I just wanted to clarify that. When
Well,
you're
ignorance of the ordinance may not be a defense, but again, you know, if the building inspector says nothing when he is presented with the application, that's not, you know, that's not just ignorance of the ordinance, that the average person, the average unschooled person who is not an engineer and is not educated in the nuances of the zoning ordinance, I think has a right to conclude that if the building inspector doesn't say anything, then it's all right.
the other tree houses that are in the neighborhood, are they from
And
kids?
I'm glad you mentioned, I've got some pictures to pass out for show and tell. I'm sorry, your question?
No, I'm just waiting to see the pictures. I'm done for now.
Go ahead, please.
I have a question. You say on page 5 that the structure does not exceed 10 feet in height.
Yes.
And I don't see how that can be so because the platform is 8 feet high, right?
Correct.
And the fence above that, the wall, has to be another 6 to 8 feet, right?
Well, the screen is separate
The
from
wall.
the wall.
The wall is 6 to 8 feet high. So in fact, we're looking at something that's probably 18 feet. And I don't know what those other tree houses look like yet, but this is a pretty large structure and is well above 10 feet off the ground.
No,
Its
the wall
presence-
or screen, whatever you want to call it, is an extension of the fence. It is not connected to the treehouse.
Well, if it is, then I don't think fences that tall are permitted in a residential
That's
district.
a different issue.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned that the property owners had previously spoken with the abutters and had received a positive consent, I guess,
Correct.
for what they were doing. Are
Yes.
there any letters in support that state that? Like, have any of the
Not that-
abutters written
not-
anything to that effect?
Not that I'm aware of. Whatever you have is what I have.
And you mentioned that it's a temporary structure, but there's really, I mean, is there some kind of a mechanism wherein at a certain point in time, like a time certain, it would be taken down and that would be an enforceable commitment, or is that just something we have to take people's word for?
No, variances like diamonds are forever. Once you grant the variance, it's there, but, so you would be relying on my client's word. But they certainly have no use for it. I mean, as far as I know, they don't particularly want a treehouse for any other purpose than to.
Things change, right? I mean, they could sell the property, somebody else could buy it, and
You are correct. You are correct.
I'm sorry, Ms. Martin.
Yes, so one of the photos that you're showing us is that after the wood has weathered, it would suggest a period of time in which it will be up. I mean, this does not, I mean, it qualifies as a structure under the zoning ordinance. This does not look like a treehouse to me, it looks like a deck.
That's true.
And so, I don't want to, I'm sure your clients are of good faith, but the reality is that this could be easily repurposed after the child outgrows it.
All I can tell you is they have no intention of repurposing it. And it is a treehouse in at least one respect, because it's, one of its main supports are the two trees.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you, Mr. McCollum. All right, we'll open the public comment for this. So is anyone here to speak in favor of this application? Please come to the podium.
Hello, I'm John Rodchek. I'm the actual, I build tree houses. My business is called Zen Tree Works. I've been an arborist for 30 years. Worked in New York City, Connecticut, all along the I-95 corridor, Boston, and up here for like the last 15 years. Been building tree houses for about 7 now. Build one for my kids, got in the Portsmouth newspaper, and boom, business took off. So I want to bring a little context to everything that's going on here. So it is a platform. It's not a tree house. That tree house thing is everyone thinks house is like a big tree house. It's not. It's a platform. And what I'm going to try to go through is everything that happened as this whole thing kind of like unfolded. So I got actually contacted by McDermott Landscaping first. She's the one who designed this platform. And what I did, I came in, I looked at it, and I said, okay, we can do that. First thing I asked Jill Maloney was, what do your neighbors think? Because this is always like the first question I ever ask when I go to a property. Because 9 times out of 10, they always get built on the edge of a property because that's where all the old growth trees are. And especially in cities and towns, that's usually the only ones that are left that are any good to actually build on. She said yes. Talked to all my neighbors. Everybody was fine with it. I said fine. She said that the rear neighbor, had one request, and that was to build a wall to block their view of the children. And I said, oh, well, in order to do that, I have to actually increase the size of the deck to go back beyond the trees, closer to the fence line where they wanted it, so that it kind of looked like it was like part of their fence line that was already there. So that's what I did. So again, this increased the cost to the Maloneys right off the bat. They wanted to do that. They wanted to do what they were, and the neighbor actually came out probably like the first or second day I was building. Hey, what's going on? Hey, and he goes, and you're building a wall? I'm like, yep, I'm building a wall for you. This is where it's going to be. It's going to be right next to your fence. You guys can paint it whatever color you want. You know what I mean? It's going to be so high so you can't see the kids. He asked me, how high is it going to be? I'm like, well, it's probably going to be, the kids, this child's like about 4 or 5 feet tall, so I'm going to make it like 6, 7 feet tall. He said, fine. Okay. A couple days later, the other neighbor came out, the neighbor on the side who agreed to it, because that's the side neighbor, and he came over, he walked on the property, he looked at the tree deck, he says, I know I agreed to this. It's a little bit bigger than I imagined. He says, is there anything you can do about it? And we're like, well, what do you want us to do? He says, can you move the whole deck? I'm like, well, it's already attached to the trees. I can't, we're talking about moving the whole thing. He says, what else can you do? I says, well, he just was really concerned that it was like a little bit too close to his fence line. So I'd tell you what if we cut 2 feet off the deck for you? So Jill, they talked about it for a little while. They came to agreement. I actually removed 2 feet of the deck, which again cost them more money because it's just I charge by the hour. It's labor, right? So I had to remove 2 feet of the deck on the side so that neighbor was happy. And then a couple days later, the older gentleman in the back came out, and he was kind of like he was not really happy with what was going on. And I just asked him like, well, I thought you agreed with it. You agreed to it. And he goes, well, my wife did. At this point, I'm like, I can't. It was already built, and what am I supposed to do now? So it was at that point the deck was built, but there were no railings on it. For my, I'm a tree climber. I'm very safety conscious. I'm like, well, I can't leave this like this. I have to put the rails on it at least. I don't want your son going up here or the kids in the neighborhood coming up here and just having an open deck where they can just run around and fall off of. I finished off. I built the railings around it, and then then everything else just kind of happened. So this is a while ago when that's the context of what was going on. So as far as I know, well, I know she did. Her neighbors were fine with it. They didn't have an issue. She bent over backwards trying to make everybody happy. And along with the building inspector, like she said, one of my first tree houses was built in Portsmouth. Didn't need a permit. I've done a lot of estimations for tree houses in Portsmouth. Never needed a permit. I've built all over the coast, all over the East Coast, the coast here, into Manchester, up north. Every town's different, but I'm just saying, I've always say, are our neighbors okay with this? And they were fine with it. It wasn't until it was built that everyone started complaining about it. And, that's my part of it. The trees, you can't, it's attached to trees. If I was and it's not a tree, everyone keeps saying tree house, it's a platform. And I understand what you're saying, you're talking about the fence height. That was by his request. If he doesn't want that on there, that can be removed. But when everyone agrees to everything, and all of a sudden everything's built, and then they disagree with it, well, I don't know what to say, but I've never, ever had this. Like I said, I've been doing this in this business for 30 years. I've never had an issue like this before. Usually when the neighbors agree, everybody's happy, and there's no problems. Any questions?
All right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Anyone else to speak in favor of the application? Come forward, please.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jill Maloney, the owner of 389 Lincoln Avenue. Excuse me if I'm a little nervous. If you did get to read all the letters against the treehouse, I kind of feel like it's me against the city of Portsmouth. So bear with me. But I just want to give a little context of what happened from my point of view. My family and I never set out to anger our neighbors or make enemies. All we wanted to do was have a play set for our child to play. We really thought we were doing everything right when we hired the local designer, hired a local builder. We were excited about this new adventure, and we wanted our neighbors to know and see what was happening. We first spoke with Kelly Wright, who lives next door to us, of our plans. He approved the platform and even helped us put up our son's zip line that goes from one of the platforms to a tree. One occasion he came over, he was unhappy, as John told you, and we had cut off a portion of the platform to appease him. I also spoke to Mark Moses and his wife Tess, who live right behind us, who were also going to be affected by the treehouse. I even had his wife come over and show her where it was going to be placed. I asked, since it was so close to their fence, would they like a privacy wall? Unfortunately, there's no letters because I tried to text them and I realized that they have only a landline, so my texts were returned. So I would write a little letter and stick it in their mailbox, and that's how I ended up getting a hold of them, because being new to Portsmouth, I really didn't know many people in the area. So she came over, she approved of where it was going to be. She even commented on my garden and told me how she likes to garden, and I really thought it was a very pleasant experience. When they requested the wall, we even let them pick out the wood. We had the best part of the wood facing their property. They asked if they could paint it. I said, of course, make it however it can so it can blend into your property. Then I got a call from Jason Page at the complaint department that our neighbor Kelly Weinstein, who does live next door to us but can't see the treehouse, called to complain about our fence, and then added in a complaint about the treehouse for good measure. That's a whole other story, but I found that. I was told I would need to get a permit. So after filling out a permit request, I found out from the building inspector again that this wasn't needed. So needless to say, my family and I are happy, right? My son's happy. Imagine my surprise months later when I get a letter from the zoning board telling me I'm not in compliant with the zoning laws. Again, all honest mistake. We were completely blindsided, my family and I. throughout the whole process, we thought that we were in good standing with our neighbors. I mean, they never came up to us and spoke to any displeasure about it after that. I didn't speak to any of the other abutters because, quite frankly, they can't really see the treehouse from their property. They might be able to see snippets of wood or part of the wall that our neighbors behind us requested, but you can't see it from the street. So one of our neighbors who actually wrote in to complain said she could see the treehouse when she said to me, oh, I heard you got Ellen Cohen said, oh, I heard you built a treehouse. How nice. I can't see it from here. And I said, oh, you're welcome to come over anytime and see it. So, dear members, please just understand that my family has only acted in good faith. I mean, it was really an honest mistake. We thought we were doing the right thing through everything by hiring all local designers and builders. You know, we could have just bought some ugly, bright plastic metal thing and stuck it up, and that's what they would have been seeing, instead of a beautiful wood that's going over time to really blend into the landscape. I mean, that's what the designer does. She builds these designs that really look like they're part of your land. I mean, everything we did, we wanted to save the charm of Portsmouth. We love Portsmouth. We've only been here for a little over a year, and I mean, we chose it for its charm. So, in ending, I just want to say, you know, what does it solve by moving it? They're still going to see some sort of play structure in our yard. I mean, Mark Moses lives on top of a hill, we're at the bottom. So no matter what we put there, it's going to mess up their view. I apologize, for 30 years, there was no children on that side. Now they hear a bunch of third graders, you know, yelling and screaming after school, and I'm sure that can be kind of annoying. But, you know, they raised their kids 30 years ago, and it's our chance for us to raise our kid and let him have a tree house or a tree platform or whatever we're calling it, and for other children to enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is anyone else speak in favor of the application? Mr. Stitt, do we have anybody on Zoom to?
Actually, yes. Kimberly Oakes.
Hi, sorry about that. I am a neighbor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am a neighbor. I live 5 doors down from the Maloney's. I am embarrassed. I am embarrassed at this, the forum that this has been raised to. You know, I've read all of the complaints. One of them says it's ironic. It's unfortunate when residents violate the spirit of neighborliness and mutual accommodation that prevails throughout most of Portsmouth. It is unfortunate. This is exactly what is happening here with the complaints about a treehouse that has nothing to do with setbacks, variances, height, nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with the neighbors behind them don't want to see or hear children, although they have not complained about any noise. They don't want to see children. The other complaints, grain of salt, there's some digging there. If you have time, I'm sure you'll find some interesting stories there. But the wall that has been complained about by that very neighbor, the one who took the pictures, the wall was at his request, their request, his wife's request, you know, both of their requests. It's just ridiculous. It's embarrassing. So I apologize to the Maloneys for having this kind of warm welcome into the state of New Hampshire, the town of Portsmouth. I'm embarrassed. I apologize. And I think it's ridiculous. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. So, Peter, anybody else?
Anyone else on the Zoom call would like to speak in favor?
All right, seeing none. Is there anyone that'd like to speak in opposition to this application? Please come to the podium and state your name and address, please.
My name is Kelly Wright. I live at 409 Lincoln. I'm a primary abutter. and I'm here to speak in opposition of granting of the waiver. I want to push back on the timeline a little bit. We never saw plans. We were never consulted as to size and impact. The first, I had heard that something was in the works. There was a lower play structure that had been constructed earlier in the summer. It's quite small. It was like a 3x4. Something else was going to accompany that. Jill referenced the fact that we put in the zip line, which I thought would be joining these two structures. I had no idea as to the size and sort of imposing presence that this would have. Construction began a week of August the 9th. I complained, or I approached Jill and Evan regarding my concerns on the 11th. Construction concluded a few days after that. The application for permit, at least according to what's been submitted, was in mid-September. So it was well after the completion of the structure. At the time, I expressed my concerns about the setbacks. This is in August, when the construction was ongoing. And the builder stated what he stated here tonight, which is what he has, done. He's experienced and done this, countless times throughout the Seacoast, and never needed a permit. Well, I'm wondering if he actually sought a permit in a case like this. So this isn't a borderline issue. This isn't, we're a few feet from a setback. This is directly on the property line. And as far as the building inspector goes, to speak to Ms. Margison's point, I'm not sure it's his job to enforce zoning ordinances. I think one of the things that's getting lost in this is the size of the deck. It's the main deck, and I think you all have pictures of it. I didn't realize I could bring them to be distributed, but I'm going to distribute them now. I only have a copy of each, but I think you already have provided.
You can share.
The main deck is 168 square feet. It's conjoined by a ramp of similar construction that's 3 feet wide and about 15 feet long, and joins a lower deck. So this is a single structure. It's not 168 square feet. It's more like 230 to 40 square feet of lot coverage. This coincides roughly with the average size of a single-car garage. Ms. Aldridge referenced the height. I would push back on that as well. The height of the deck is 8 feet at the back of the property. I would estimate it's closer to 10 at the front. There's a privacy fence in the picture. You can see the height of that post is 7 feet. So the floor of that structure is well above, I think, the 8 feet that's been stated. I don't measure the height of my house to the floor of my attic. I measure to the peak of my roof. So this idea that there's an 8-foot setback required is directly connected to the height of the structure. There are other tree houses in the neighborhood. That is an obvious fact. If you go to Home Depot and you look at the largest play structure that they sell, it's called the Gorilla. It's quite big, but when you strip away the slides and the swings, you're looking at a core tower structure that has a square footage coverage of 5 feet 10 by 9 feet 10. It's under 60 square feet of lot coverage. That is 2.5 times smaller than the main structure. It's 1/4 of the overall structure. So to say that this is like other tree structures in the neighborhood or play structures, I think is misleading. It is way beyond what is ordinary and expected. In terms of loss of privacy, as in a abutter, the structure is located. I will give them this, the logical place that you would place a structure. It's open space. It's great for play. Kids have been playing there. We have no issue. But it is the farthest spot away from the home at 389. So at no window in their house do they view the structure on their patio, on their deck, by their fire pit. They can't see it. It's viewable from every room in the back of our house. It's viewable from our deck, our backyard. To my mind, the Maloneys enjoy all of the benefits of this structure, but they don't experience any of the impact this structure has created. And that goes to loss of value. We have an undefined timeline in terms of what this variance allows, the lifetime of this structure. If I were to sell next year, I think that the presence of this structure, it's encroaching, it's imposing. It would, I think, it'd be a deterrent to other buyers. The tree logic, which Mr. McCallum stated out, is, in my mind, hilarious. You can't move the trees, therefore you can't have a setback because you can't have a tree house. If the shoe was on the other foot, if the Maloneys had a structure that was built next to their house that has the impact that it has on myself and other abutters, we would have been in this, variance meeting months before, I can assure you. So, I have no ill will towards them. I want them to have a play structure that's appropriate for the lot. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition?
My name is Mark Moses, and I'm here with my wife, Tess Feltis, and we live at 178 Highland Street, and we've resided there for the last 40 years. Before I get started with my objection, I need to respond to the allegation that we have an issue with children playing. Nothing could be further from the truth, or the presence of a tree house in a normal sense of the word. We raised 3 children. We had play structures. They came, they went. They were not a problem to neighbors. We were very respectful, and they were small. The gross mischaracterization of who we are, who we have been as members of this community for 40 years, and is also a mischaracterization of the basis of our objection. So I needed to get that off my chest before we begin.
And I worked at the Children's Museum for 12 years, so I don't hate children, just for the record.
And we have nothing against the Maloneys. Our backyard abuts the applicants and the structure. The issue is that it's directly along our fence with 0 setback. Talk about elbow room. I don't think you can put your pinky in between where it sits and our fence. The span is 25 feet right along our property line, the structure, and then the 15-foot ramp. We have always had a good relationship with our neighbors. We approached the applicants with the same mindset when they moved in. Neither myself or my wife want to be taking a position against one of our neighbors. We've never done this before, but we felt compelled to attend this evening because of the profound impact this structure has had on us. More specifically, the structure is concerning for several reasons. First, its size is imposing and dominates the field of view in our backyard and from our house. Second, it also invades our privacy. And third, it prevents safety issues outlined in our letter. It is important for the board to know that any initial verbal concessions and conversations attributed to us were made in the spirit of trying to be neighborly. However, these concessions were made without accurate information as to the scope and other details of the structure. No details, no sketch. Had we known the structure that sits there today would be erected when we had these initial conversations, we would have voiced our strong concerns and opposition at that time. We never were fine with it. That was, Mr. McCallum's mentioned that a few times. We were never fine with the structure. When we saw it being constructed, we were shocked. I also want to make a correction here that Jill Maloney said, and also Mr. McCallum said, that we requested this privacy screen or wall or whatever we call it. That is clearly attached only to the deck. It is not part of our fence. Here is the original note to Tess. I can read it, pass it around if you want. Hi neighbors, it's Jill Maloney, 389 Lincoln Ave. I stopped by to let you know we are putting a tree house in the back. It would overlook your property, so wanted to know if you wanted us to put a privacy wall up or not. Would love to discuss. Please stop by and call. I think there's a difference between our requesting it and their offering it as an option. And at that point, without any detail of what that would look like, we said, well, yeah, we'd like some privacy. We were surprised when we saw what the structure was and also what was proposed for the wall. If it was going to stay, we were interested in minimizing the impact. We were not okay about it. We were not fine. I'll be glad to pass these.
So if that
Mr.
becomes
Moses.
property of the city, if you,
Mr. Moses, if that becomes property of the city, if you want to hand it out, otherwise, is that all right? Okay. I think it's 5 minutes.
okay. If you could just wrap that up, sir, we don't allow,
Okay.
thank you.
It's important for the board to know that any initial verbal concessions attributed to us were made in the spirit that I talked about. Additionally, there are a few inaccuracies in what was presented in the application. The fact that needs correction beyond dimensions that already mentioned by Mr. Wright. The claim of the structure is temporary. It does not impair value in the neighborhood properties, is, I think, absurd, undeveloped, and conclusory. Common knowledge supports the assertion that an unsightly, obstructive, and potentially dangerous structure that not only violates setback requirements but is not set back from the lot line whatsoever does adversely impact the value of our property and makes it less desirable. Second, the assumption made that the privacy wall that towers 15 feet above the ground provides sufficient privacy is not the case. I'd like some photos to be projected if possible, you know, that the view of the yard and also the onto the structure and from the house and the structure into the house is very obvious. The removal of the unsightly privacy wall would only breach privacy more. The platform essentially becomes then a balcony over our yard, a direct view into our home. Third, the applicant raised the point that similar structures are in the neighborhood, and there was this discussion of treehouse, but the builder said it's not, it's a deck, and that was determined by the planning department as an elevated deck accessory structure, not a treehouse. And finally, that the presence of the structure does not harm the abutters. For all of the reasons that I've mentioned, it certainly does, especially about privacy. So with all that said, the applicant has acknowledged, as the planning department has established, that the placement of the deck structure was a mistake. Regardless of whatever makes or mistakes were made or misfortunes led to the erection of the structure without permit, and notices to abutters detailing the nature, extent, and location of the structure, the fact remains that we are neighbors and harmed by the presence, as stated in our letter and other letters submitted in opposition to the application. We believe this board serves as an invaluable purpose of ensuring lawful uses of property in Portsmouth and protecting against unreasonable interference with the rights of abutters. For this reason, in our letter, as well as the 11-10-21 memorandum from the Planning Department, we believe this structure violates sensible zoning laws and unreasonable interferences or impairs the rights of abutters, especially us at 178 Highland Street. Therefore, we ask that the board please deny this request.
right.
Thank you for your
sir.
time.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Kelly Weinstein. I live at 373 Lincoln Ave. I'm a direct abutter of the Maloneys. I'd like to start by addressing the letter that was submitted by the Maloneys, or Evan Maloney. I can assure you that there is no public or private campaign against the Maloneys, nor am I involved in any sort of campaign against them, both currently or historically. So I just wanted to start by addressing that. I only know a few people who have submitted letters in opposition of this. Most of the accusations in his letter are false, contrived. We've been grossly misquoted in several occasions, and I think that my family's positive reputation will be clear. We're active community members. I did want to address Jill's suggestion that I called the city about the treehouse. That's not the case. I called the city about their newly erected fence, in which I learned that was also in violation of code, in which it's not supposed to be higher than 4 feet tall, 14 feet back from the front of the property. My husband and I decided not to address that with the city. It was at that time that a member of the city asked me if these were the same people as the treehouse people. I can't see the treehouse from my property. It was the first time that I had heard about the treehouse. It was at that time that I did learn that there was a conflict with many people about the treehouse and the negative impact of the neighbors. Regardless, that's not why I'm here. I'm simply here to support Mark and Tess and Kelly and Misa and the negative impact on their lives and their property. I don't support the variance where it's clear that there's a 0-foot setback where 8 feet is required, and a 5-foot setback where 8 feet is required. So it's for those reasons that I am here and speaking and submitted the letter today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Carol Hollis, and I live on Union Street. And I just wanted to say that zoning exists to protect the neighbors and neighborhoods. And so whatever the zoning says is probably a good idea. And so I asked the ZBA to have the applicant dismantle or move the treehouse so that it meets zoning.
Thank you.
I promise I'll be brief because I know we should move on from this. My name is Jake Weinstein, 373 Lincoln Ave, direct abutter to the Maloneys. Thank you for the members of the board for your service in here tonight. And I just want to state on the record that regarding the letter written by Mr. Maloney and the public record that you guys have, the Maloneys made many false statements, false quotes, misrepresentations about my wife and myself. Most notably, neither my wife or I am in any type of campaign against this treehouse, nor did I ever admit to such a thing. I'm merely here to reflect my disapproval for the waiver, equitable waiver of variance, as it would set precedent for an erosion of standards that's costly to my neighbors, Mark and Tess, and Kelly and Misa particularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to this application? Or do we have anybody on Zoom?
Sage Clark.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. So Sage Clark, 582 Lincoln Avenue. First off, thank you to the board for your service in helping us solve these problems in our neighborhoods. So I had heard some rumblings in the neighborhood about this structure that was going up, this treehouse that was being built, and that it was really causing aggravation for the abutters. And I thought, you know, what's the big deal? Someone wants a treehouse in their backyard. I've raised my children in this neighborhood, as have the abutters and many other people, and we've all had various play structures at various times, and have enjoyed those for our children. So I was eventually invited to take a look at the treehouse from the vantage point of the Wright's driveway. And I could not believe what I saw. I mean, I was expecting something maybe 3 or 4 feet, little peaked roof, walls, something befitting the size of a child. There's nothing quaint about this thing, and it's not a tree house. I mean, it's essentially a viewing platform into the Wright's property. There is no place on their property where they can't not see it. And especially from their back deck. So they essentially have no privacy left. I know that Mr. McCallum asserted in his letter that privacy is not an issue for the neighbors from the 2 sides of the property, and it's far from the property line, but he clearly did not consult the abutters when making that statement. It's just wishful thinking because they have no privacy left. There's no way they can't be within visual and auditory contact with whatever is going on the structure at all times. It's ironic to me because it seems that the Maloneys are very concerned with the boundaries of their property and their privacy. Mention was made of the new privacy fence that they erected on the one side of their property that didn't have a tall fence. Their house has numerous security cameras on it looking out at everybody who comes past the house. So to me, it feels a little ironic that they would be so inconsiderate and unconcerned with the privacy of their abutters when they're clearly very concerned with their own privacy on their own property. I don't think there was any malice intended. I'm sure that they just wanted to give their son something enjoyable, same thing that we want for all our children, but there's a certain kind of inconsideration in the process of doing that. The idea that the structure can't go anywhere else in the property because there's not trees available is a little bit crazy because their property has multiple trees all over the place. In addition to this large viewing deck, the ramp system on it is big enough to push a whole wagon or wheelbarrow up and down it. So I think essentially what I'm saying is the thing is too big, it's too high, it's too close, and it's just too intrusive. And I don't think anybody would want to live next to it. Thank you for your time.
All right, have anybody else on Zoom, Peter? Yes, sir.
My name is Lance Hellman. I live at 228 Highland Street. I was sent the information about this hearing. I've done many things in my life, but I'd like to be thought of as an artist tonight. And I'm only going to address one aspect of this platform, and that is that from the Moses' house, they have a beautiful, highly landscaped backyard, and the wall attached to the top of the treehouse, whatever its origins or province, is too big. It's not as big as a billboard, but it's objectionably large. So their view of their backyard now has this as a prominent feature, and I think it's excessive. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else to speak in opposition? Anybody on Zoom?
I don't see any hands raised.
All right. So is there anybody speak to, for, or against? Last chance to make a comment one way or the other. Please come to the podium and state your name and your address, please.
Hello again, Jill Maloney, 389 Lincoln Avenue. First, I just want to speak to the person on Zoom who mentioned the security cameras. If you had read my husband's letter, the security cameras were actually set in place because the Portsmouth Police Department requested us to do it because we were being harassed by the Weinstein children and their friends. We actually have camera evidence, so I'm not going to go into that, but that's why we ended up getting security cameras from the Portsmouth Police Department's request. I want to speak to the board members. Have any of you actually come to see the tree platform that they're talking about? Okay, so Mark Moses, right next to him, there is another family that has a play structure, and they put up their own wall, Mark and his wife. It's actually in one of the pictures, but I guess the design is pretty enough, and they painted it so it's not like glaring at them. So if our wall was painted, maybe they would like it better. I told them that they could paint it, but they haven't yet, but again, they didn't want to see the children playing on the other side of their abutters, so they put up their own wall. It looks very nice, so I can see why that is something that they like. If you've never been to our house, we have a very interesting, I guess, land, the way it's designed. It's actually 2 lots. So we have our house, and then there is a garage or a studio, and then there's empty space. So we couldn't technically put anything else where our lot is. We have that second lot, which again, I imagine for 30 years, was just trees and flowers and quiet. And now there's a children's play area. So no matter where we put that play area in that lot, they're going to see and hear children. It's not going to have any privacy. I could put a swing set there. They're still going to not have privacy. The kids are still going to see, like you can see into your neighbors. It doesn't matter if it's a tree house or not. There's no way not to have privacy because the way that the house is set up. We can't put it. It's a huge lot, which we're very grateful for, and that's where we want to put our child's play structure. Our house, we can't put it there. So as they keep talking about the no privacy, we're seeing all of this, like they're going to see it no matter what we put there. If you grant for the treehouse to be removed and put further in, it's still going to be tall. I mean, there's not going to be a privacy wall. That was really expensive. So the children are still going to see into their yard. There's still going to be children there. There's no way around it, really. So just wanted to let you know how the lay of our land was and why this is a special condition, because there's really no other place to put it. So thank you, and I really hope that you vote for the platform to stay.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? 2, 4, or against?
I'm Christine Haggerty. I'm in a butter and live at 202 Highland Street. I can see the structure. It is very imposing. I'm not as affected as the Moses are, but I just needed to say, I raised kids next to the Moses. They love my kids. My kids had a swing set. They made lots of noise. It isn't about that. It's about a structure that is just too big. So I am opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Duncan McCallum representing the Maloneys. I just wanted to make a comment or two about these letters that Mr. Moses relies so heavily on. There is a thing or two that's peculiar about them. For example, I have to confess I have difficulty understanding how the woman from 579 Sagamore Avenue has any stake or interest in what happens at the Maloney's place at 389 Lincoln Street. She's a mile away. The same with respect to the woman who lives at 12 South Street, who wrote a letter in opposition. I'm having trouble seeing why it should matter to her one way or the other, what goes on in a neighborhood that's a mile away from her. And almost without exception, only a tiny handful of the people who've written letters can even see the treehouse from their property. Almost all of these, with the exception of just one or two, these people live at least a quarter mile away or more. They can't even see the treehouse, and yet they're writing letters excoriating my clients and excoriating the treehouse. I think you can see what's going on here. The fact of the matter is, out of all of the people who wrote letters, none of them have anything to do with this property. Almost none, with a handful of exceptions, none of them are even in the neighborhood, and almost none of them can even see the treehouse. The woman who lives across the street at 420 Lincoln Street, who wrote a letter in opposition to my client's petition, Katinka de Reuter, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She lives directly across the street from my client's property, and she can't even see the treehouse. She lives across the street, and she can't see it. So I regard many of these letters in opposition, I think, have to be taken with a grain of salt. The fact of the matter is, this treehouse isn't harming anybody, and for all of those reasons, my client's application should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Peters, anybody else on Zoom?
Anyone else on the Zoom call want to speak to, for, or against?
All right, final opportunity.
There's one.
Oh, sorry.
W. Clark. Sort of.
Hello?
Hello?
Just to that last point, I just wanted to say that, I live at 582 Lincoln, 3 blocks away, but I spend quite a bit of time in Kelly's backyard, and it does affect me. So I think I also have neighbors who have put their shed next door to my house in the middle of their yard to avoid abutting, and I think that Kelly deserves it.
Yeah, I think we lost.
Yeah.
I think we lost. There's one other, Edgar Gilchrist.
Hi, I just wanted to contradict what the lawyer said, that none of the people that wrote the letters, or very few, were direct neighbors. We live across the street, and we wrote a letter in opposition, 398 Lincoln Avenue.
All right, thank you. Anyone else, Peter?
No one else.
All right. Anyone else in the audience? All right. Seeing no one rise, and since I didn't get the gavel, rap of the knuckle, we'll close the public comment. And it's up to the board to have a discussion and a vote, perhaps a motion for somebody. So what do you think?
You were trying to do the talking and not letting.
Oh, no, then you go.
All right, Ms. Margison.
I think we have to decide whether or not we're going to go the equitable waiver route or the variance route. So, I mean, I have my own thoughts, but I want to. I would defer to others. I think Phyllis went to say
On
something.
the equitable waiver route, there are some things that concern me, and that is that there were two professionals involved in this, a designer and a builder, and neither one of them thought to bring this up. I don't think that is acceptable, and I think that the expectation for professionals should be that they would be more familiar with the requirements of the building code.
I would agree that equitable waiver is not the way to go, and that I would consider it as a variance instead, if we need a motion for that, or
We're in discussion now, so
shall I make a
what's it?
motion?
Fire away.
I would move that we consider this as a variance, because I don't believe an equitable waiver is the way to go with this property, for the reasons stated that professionals were working and more should have been known.
So,
I'll wait for it.
I'll second. I'll only add that I think this structure probably constitutes a private nuisance. I think that ignorance of the zoning laws is not a basis upon which we can actually, that they cannot claim ignorance of the zoning laws. So I support the motion, and we'll vote for it.
I'm trying to think, would we be making a motion to not grant the equitable waiver or not?
Yeah, and I'm not even sure that you need a motion, it's just, you have to just determine, they're requesting
Either
an
one,
equitable
one or
waiver.
the other.
If not that, then variance.
Well, I think maybe if we could withdraw the motion and just not consider the equitable
I
waiver
would
and
be
move on to
happy
the.
to do that.
Right.
I'm fine doing that.
Right. So we're on the variance now.
I would like to speak briefly to that, but after more than an hour, I feel that I'm really willing to hear this as if this were coming to us for the first time and consider, would I give it a variance in the light of just seeing this project? Clearly, there's a lot of emotion, but for us, there's the 5 criteria that it has to meet. And for me, this doesn't meet all of the criteria because I don't think it's in the public interest or observes the spirit of the ordinance. And one of the reasons I say that is that the zoning board, when it gets a request for a variance in a home in close proximity to another home, one of the things we're really cognizant of is not infringing in the space of the home that's there. If somebody wants a deck, we make sure it's not going to look over the person's backyard. If somebody wants an air conditioner, we try to put it in the place that is the most quiet. If somebody wants to put a window in, it's the same kind of consideration. And I just think this fails on all of those criteria. And since it doesn't meet the 5, I would have to vote against giving it a variance. And that's where I would start this.
So any other thoughts?
I have a thought as well that I would like to share, and that is that I wonder what we would be accomplishing by denying the variance, because if I understand the relevant citation for setbacks, and considering that this is being viewed as kind of a platform, kind of a treehouse, I would imagine that the homeowners, if they really want to have this kind of a structure, could do it by having it as a freestanding platform and relocating it. I don't think that it would, I think they would need a 10 to 16 foot setback, depending on what the square footage of this thing really is. And I don't see how that would enhance the privacy for the surrounding properties. So I don't know that we'd really be accomplishing anything by denying the variance.
It shouldn't be a private conversation, but I'm going to answer. For me, if they don't need a variance, they can do pretty much whatever they want. But my objection to this has to do with the fact that it is so intrusive on the other property, and that is something that we consider in 1 and 2 of the criteria. Also, I'm not sure there's a real hardship, because if this is a platform, and we've been told it is and not a treehouse, it doesn't need trees, and it could go someplace else in the yard. So,
Yeah,
again,
that's right.
Not seeing it.
Markson.
So I will second Phyllis's motion. I think it.
I don't think that was an
So
actual
it wasn't
motion.
really a
Oh, I
motion.
thought
Would
you
you
made
like
a
to make?
motion. Oh, I thought- okay, I'm sorry. So I'll let you make a motion if you would like.
So moved. No, you have to make a motion.
I would vote to deny the variance request. I think that it fails a couple of things. I think there are no special conditions of the property that render it, that there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to that property. The proposed use is a reasonable one, but I think it having a tree house or a deck in a residential neighborhood is fine, but I do not think that there is anything specific to this property that allows it to be exempt from the zoning ordinance. I think that, I do agree with Ms. Eldridge in that I think that I think this really conflicts with the explicit or implicit purpose of the ordinance, which is for setbacks in neighborhoods. That is sort of a bedrock principle of zoning ordinances. I think there is probably more harm to the general public than there is to the benefit to the applicant, and therefore I think it fails the substantial justice prong.
So let me just be clear, we have a motion and a second then, is that correct?
Do we have a second?
What's that?
I'll second.
Oh, okay, so who made the motion?
Beth made the motion.
I made the motion, Phyllis is seconding.
All right, well, okay, so we have a motion and a second, and there's any discussion about that? If none, I'd like to make a couple of comments. I was once an 8 and 10-year-old boy. I got a Purple Heart in tree houses when I fell out of one and broke my arm when I was about 10 years old. I've built them with anything from 2 boards to my cousins and I built an elaborate castle in the tree one time that you could have put one of these inside there and still have room to walk around. So size and location is really not a criteria for a tree house. It's kind of in the eyes of the beholder. In this area, in the Portsmouth, all the houses are in very close proximity to everything, and pretty much everything your neighbor does, you're going to be able to see, no matter what the circumstances are. So it's unfortunate that, the situation came to this, but we're here to deal with it. So having said that, if anybody else would like to make any comments, I'd be glad to hear them. Mr. McDonald?
This is a particularly difficult decision because I don't think it's directly and clearly addressed by the ordinances much of anywhere. And so the purpose of ordinances in the first place is to ensure that property owners maintain the use and enjoyment of their property. When that use and enjoyment infringes on abutters and neighbors' use and enjoyment of their property, you have a very hard decision. Somebody is going to win and somebody must lose unless they're better at negotiating than I am. So seeing the problem that way, I would say the applicants who are trying to provide a play opportunity for their child see that child grow up and the play opportunity is no longer applicable, then that problem goes away, and it should go away for the neighbors too. It should go away for the people who have lost some use and enjoyment of their property. And so how we're getting closer and closer to dividing the burden between both sides. I don't think either side is ever going to feel good about what comes out of this. And I don't enjoy being one of the ones to make the decision.
That's what we get paid for, David.
But I would say right now, given that the need for the treehouse is going to be expiring, that we should consider first the importance of the well-being of children, and allow this child to grow up with his caring parents providing opportunity. And then when that time expires, it's over, and the neighbors will no longer have to put up with what they've been putting up with. So for that reason, I would support a variance to allow the treehouse to remain until the child is too old to need it anymore.
Well, unfortunately, a variance stays with the property forever, and the motion we have on the floor is to deny the variance.
And this is really for an accessory structure. It's not, I mean, it's being called a structure or a treehouse, but the reality is that this is really, the variance request is really for a accessory structure.
Yeah, looking at the pictures, I never thought it was a treehouse per se.
All right, so we have your motion, Ms. Marchson.
Excuse me?
You made the motion to,
To deny the variance.
all right, and could you restate that, please? Your reasons?
My reasons to deny are that I think it just has to fail one prong. I think the property does not have special conditions for which there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to this property. This is an accessory structure that is being built within the setbacks. And I also think that it does fail for the same reasons primarily, it fails the public interest and spirit of the ordinance, in that it's directly in conflict with the express and implicit purpose of the ordinance, which is for side yard setbacks.
Thank you. Your second, Ms.
I did second it, and can I address something?
Sure.
I just want to say to Mr. McDonald's concern, which is very kind, but I'm not sure it's an either or. I'm not sure it's having this treehouse or an unhappy childhood. I mean, I feel like there are other ways for an 8-year-old on a double lot in Portsmouth to have fun. So for me, that isn't a big consideration, nor is it really part of the zoning consideration. But
So if no more comments, we'll call for a vote. The motion is to deny the variance. Mr. Rossi?
I agree.
So that's a yes?
That's a yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Are you keeping score, Peter, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Ms.
Am I
Ms.
too
Eldridge?
clever?
Sorry,
Yes.
I didn't mean to skip you.
Yes.
All right. Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
No.
Mr. Mantle?
Mantle, yes.
Mantle. The vice chair votes no. The vote is?
4-2.
So the variance is denied.
Correct.
All right. All right, Arthur, come back.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Too bad we couldn't have had a nice, easy one for you to break.
Yeah, you know, start at the top.
Thank you.
Could have been worse, could have been 53 green.
No kidding.
Please leave as quickly as you can, folks, and take your conversations outside.
Okay,
Thank you very
let's
much.
get rid of these.
It's always good to have a school principal in the room.
There you go.
Yeah.
I used to teach my.
Yes, please.
I have more pictures of tree houses than I need.
Where's the chicken board?
You know why? 'Cause
That,
people can understand.
that completes old business. Let's move right into new business. Item A reads as follows. The request of Cyrus Beer and Erica Karen, owners, for the property located at 64 Mount Vernon Street, whereas relief is needed to add a condenser unit which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.515.14 to allow a 4-foot setback where 10 feet is required. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 111, Lot 30, and lies within the General Residence B, GRB, and Historic Districts. Who speaks in favor of this project, please? Welcome.
Hello. Don't be, guess something I said. Thank you so much for your service. Yes, I'm Erica Beer. I live at 64 Mount Vernon Street. My home abuts City Hall. We are looking to put in central air, and the unit will be away from the street and any neighbor's view of the property. What else can I say? I'm a little nervous.
You're doing great.
No need.
That we plan, my husband plans to build a structure to camouflage the unit if it's, and it will be placed in the least visible location. There really won't be any impact to our property, anyone else on the street. And the only impact I can think is they won't have to hear 3 children and a dog barking on hot summer days and nights. So in the last 10 years that we've lived on this street, there are 9 houses on our street, and 7 of them have central air now in the last few years. We're sort of one of the last holdouts. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, except the current house is about 200 years old, and the temperatures on the second floor can reach almost 90, 95 degrees on a regular, very hot summer night. And it's made it impossible at times to sleep up there. And so this will just add to a sense of comfort and security, knowing that we don't have to worry about keeping our windows open at night. We don't plan to use it often, but I don't know what else to say.
Fine. Any questions from the board at this point? No? Apparently not. Yeah, Mr. McDonald.
Do you still plan to screen it?
Yes, we can screen it. We're happy to screen it. I've noticed that there are a few houses on the street that have screened theirs with bushes. Where it would be placed is actually right up against the backside where City Hall is. There's like a parking lot there. So it wouldn't, I'm not sure if it needs screening. We've offered to do that. Yeah, some of the neighbors have put bushes, I noticed, around theirs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Part 2 of my question.
Yep.
Generally, the reason for side yard clearances is to allow access for emergency equipment like fire trucks and things like that.
Okay.
In this case, the code anticipates 10 feet, and you'd like to reduce it to 4.
It's already 4 now.
And so my question is, on the other side of the house, you're not asking for a variance, so you must have 10 feet. Has anyone from the city discussed with you the accessibility for emergency apparatus? Okay. Do you have any idea how much clearance you have on that side?
Are you talking in the front, like the front of the house?
Opposite from where the air conditioner unit.
Yeah,
Front.
It would be the front. The opposite would be the front.
yeah, I mean,
City Hall.
right now
There's
we
the
have
house.
2 cars parked out there. Big deck, I don't know. I don't, okay. I'm not sure.
Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. You're going to need a variance for 4-foot clearance.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board at this? Anybody else at all? No? Thank you very much. Anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this? Anyone else? Anyone in favor? No? Seeing nobody? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Anybody at all? Okay. Any speakers to, for, or against? Last call. Last chance to speak. Seeing none? Okay. Public hearing closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Discussion from the board, or perhaps a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move to approve this variance.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. There's a motion to approve it. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mantle. Mr. Lee, your motion, please.
So this is a pretty straightforward application. We get these pretty often for air conditioning condensers. This, going through the criteria, this variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. It's just an air conditioning compressor that'll be placed out of view of the public and not bother anybody. Substantial justice will be done here because the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public. And certainly there'd be no diminishing values of the surrounding properties because of this. And little enforcement of the ordinance would result in an issue hardship because of the age of these houses. They were built 200 years ago with little thought for ventilation, cross breezes and that sort of thing. So they're unfortunately very hot, and which rises the necessity to retrofit an air conditioning unit in there. So because of that, and special conditions of the property, then the property can't be used and unreasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance. And so for those reasons, I move that we approve this application.
Thank you very much. Your second, please.
With everything Mr. Lee just said.
Thank you. Anything further before we take a vote? Okay.
I just want to note that the right yard setback is not being increased from what it is currently. It was 4 feet and it still will be 4 feet.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Yes, that's useful to note. Excuse me, those in favor, let's start with Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
Yes,
Rossi?
yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Rogerson?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald? Mr. Mantle?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. The motion is passed. It's passed. You're all set. You're welcome. All right, let me mark the scorecard here. Okay. Excuse me. Mr. Lee, it's just your lucky night.
All righty.
I have to recuse on the next issue, Court Street, as well.
All right. So this application is the request of Treadwell House Incorporated, owner for the property located at 70 Court Street, whereas relief is needed to convert the building into an 8-room inn with caretaker residence, which requires the following: a variance from section 10.440, use 10.30 to allow an inn where the use is not permitted, a variance from section 10.114.21 to allow a 13-foot maneuvering aisle where 24 feet is required. Said property is shown on the assessor map 116, lot 49, allows within the Character District 5, CD5, and Character District 4-L1, CD4-L1. Who's here to speak for this application?
Good evening, Mr. Acting Chair. My name's Chris Mulligan from...
Could I just, I'm sorry, Chris, to interrupt. I just want to get clarification from Peter Steph. It says that this is in CD5 and CD4L1, but yet...
It's just CD4L1.
L1,
Yep,
okay, I
yep.
just want to make sure, because in CD5 it would be permitted by right, so.
Right. CD4, L1.
All right,
That's
sorry.
That's okay. Again, Chris Mulligan from Boson and Associates in Portsmouth, here on behalf of the applicant, Davenport Inn LLC, and also the owner of the property, Treadwell House LLC. It's nice to see you all again. It's been a couple of months. I have with me, as part of the project team, Andrew Simonis from the Davenport Inn and Eric Sari from Altus Engineering, the project engineer. I do believe Chuck Doliak, who is a representative of the Treadwell House LLC ownership group, will either be zooming in or maybe here to speak. But in any event, as was noted, this is a proposal to convert the existing historic Treadwell House that is now standing at 70 Court Street from the existing office use to an 8-room boutique inn with a caretaker residence. I went into a bit of the history of the Treadwell House in the narrative in support, but suffice it to say it's a fairly important piece of historic architecture in Portsmouth, has quite a history, and its provenance is as an inn and rooming house at its prior location on the corner of Fleet and State Street. Approximately 1950s, it was threatened by the wrecking ball, as was quite a bit of historic Portsmouth, and through sort of an extraordinary effort by the predecessors of Mr. Doliak's ownership group, it was saved and physically removed to its current existing location. According to the tax records that the city maintains, there's approximately 3,400 square feet of livable space. Again, it was moved into this location in the 1950s and has a significant prior history, both as an inn and also some historical worth, given that it was used during the War of 1812 as a general's quarters, et cetera. In addition to the colorful past, it also has some fairly important architectural features, and I'm not going to attempt to recite those because I would not come close to doing it justice, but I provided some pictures in the submission of moldings. There's circular stair ball. There's alternating spindles on the main stairway, deep arched window bays, several significant features of an architectural nature that are fairly rare in Portsmouth these days. So the goal is to be able to utilize this property as an inn to take advantage of these unique features and history of the property, because an inn, a place of public accommodation, would allow people to access and experience and learn about the historic nature of this property and of Portsmouth in general. I think you all would agree with me that modest-sized boutique inns are very popular downtown. The Hotel Portsmouth, formerly the Sice Inn, is a couple of doors away. Further down Court Street, we have the Sailmakers Inn. Around the block is the inn at 53 Austin Street. The old Salvation Army is in the process of being repurposed into a similar type of facility. So our belief is that these are among several of these smaller boutique inns that take advantage of and play into Portsmouth's historic character, and they provide a nice counterpoint or a historic alternative to the new hotel construction we've also seen quite a bit of in the city. So tonight, we're before this board seeking two variances. The big one is obviously a variance for the specific use as an inn, which is not permitted by right in the CD4 L1 zone. We also need relief for a 13.3-foot maneuvering aisle where 24 feet is required. The maneuvering aisle, I think, and I hope you would all agree, is a pretty straightforward request. It's essentially an existing condition of the property, and it has been in existence as such for more than 60 years. In order to comply with a 24-foot travel aisle, we would either have to seriously alter the historic structure, and even then, I'm not sure we could comply, or perhaps sacrifice some of the existing parking spaces that are there. So it's almost by definition an unnecessary hardship because that's an existing non-conforming condition of this particular property that we really just can't comply with. What we're proposing would be no external changes to the existing property, and it would maintain its historic character. We are in the historic district, so any external changes to the property, if we're required as we move through the planning process, would have to be approved or further vetted by the Historic District Commission, although we're not anticipating that we're going to need any beyond just appropriate commercial signage. So with that as a background, I will move to the criteria, but before I do that, I just want to point out something that some of you may have picked up on the C1 plan that was submitted. This is the variance plan that was submitted showing the proposed use, and the first note on that plan indicates that this is a site plan for a proposed restaurant use. That is obviously not accurate, and that it was carried over from an earlier iteration of this plan and a different proposal for this property, which is not going to see the light of day. So to the extent that was burning a hole in anyone's pocket, the plan is not for any type of restaurant use. So again, an 8-unit boutique inn with a caretaker residence is the use that we're seeking approval for from the board today. We will need to go before the planning board for a conditional use permit regarding parking, given the existing nonconformities in the parking that exist now. But the variances we need are for the use and for the maneuvering aisle. So to address the 5 criteria necessary for granting a variance, granting the requested variances will not be contrary to the spirit of the ordinance, nor will they be contrary to the public interest. These 2 criteria are considered together, and the test for whether or not these are met is whether the variances being granted would substantially alter the essential characteristics of the neighborhood or otherwise threaten the public health, safety, and welfare. Here, the essential characteristic of the neighborhood would not be altered by this particular project. There are a variety of commercial and residential uses within the immediate vicinity. We have single and multifamily dwellings. We have other inns in the vicinity. We have public housing. We have municipal uses, the middle school, the firehouse. There are some retail uses down Court Street, and there are professional offices, lawyers, architects, other professionals and business offices, all in the existing neighborhood. So an inn, as we're proposing it, would be consistent and compatible with a mixed commercial residential area such as this. As far as the drive aisle configuration, that has been in place on this property for essentially over 50 years without any significant issues that we're aware of. So there will be no change in the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, nor would the health, safety, and welfare of the public be threatened. The next criteria is substantial justice, and we believe substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. And here you have to balance the loss to the applicant should the variances be denied against the benefit to the public should you require strict compliance with the ordinance. As I've discussed, I don't think the maneuvering aisle is a really tough call for you. There's really no way we can comply with the maneuvering aisle, and that requirement compliance with that requirement would require significant alteration of the historic structure. That would clearly be a loss to the applicant that outweighs any benefit to the public. With respect to the proposed change in use, we are proposing no exterior changes beyond otherwise permitted signage. And what we're proposing will promote and protect the historic and architecturally significant features of this particular property and make them available and accessible to more of the public than any other use that is likely. The current use of the property is for office space. Office space is, we're seeing a decline in the demand for office space. So it is very likely that if the variances are not granted, the highest and best use of this property would be as high-end residential dwellings, which there's always an argument for high-end residential dwellings, but what would be lost if that's the way this property goes is the ability for members of the public in greater numbers to experience and enjoy the history and the significance of this particular property. And I think that's a benefit to the public that this proposal promotes. So I think denying this variance would be a denial of substantial justice to the applicant and to the owner. Granting the variances will not result in a diminution of value of surrounding properties. The existing built environment is not going to change. There will be no exterior renovations to this property that will not have to be approved either by the HDC if we're required to do any as we go through the process. But we don't believe we're going to need to do any exterior modifications to the property. If so, they should be very limited. And as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, the use that we're proposing is compatible and consistent with the sort of panoply of existing and varied uses within the neighborhood. The mix of office, professional, commercial uses in the area, along with some residential and municipal uses, this would be consistent with and not incompatible with those uses. So values of surrounding properties should not be diminished by what we're proposing. And finally, in order to grant a variance, you have to find that there's an unnecessary hardship. And here, there are special conditions associated with this property, which prevent its proper enjoyment under the strict terms of the zoning ordinance, and thus creates an unnecessary hardship. The unique part of this property is the historic nature of the property, as the Treadwell House, that it's been moved to this location in the 1950s to be saved from the wrecking ball. And its existing architectural anomalies or architectural features that you will not find in other properties. Those are particularly, those are qualities that we feel are particularly well suited, or make this property particularly well suited for a place of public accommodation, which this property had been before it was moved to this location. This will assure that this part of historic Portsmouth will be preserved for visitors and the public. I think the way to get people to appreciate historic Portsmouth is to get them to experience historic Portsmouth. This proposal will foster and promote that ideal, and that ideal would be lost, in our opinion, if this were otherwise converted to residential use. The use is a reasonable use. It's a commercial use within a mixed commercial zone. There are examples of inns within the immediate vicinity that seem to work very well. I've discussed a few of them: the old Sice Inn, the Sailmakers Inn, the new Salvation Army that's being rehabbed. So it's a reasonable use for this location. And finally, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and its particular application to this property. Here, I would argue that the purpose of character districts and form-based zoning is to preserve the form in terms of mass scale and architectural integrity of a property, and make sure that it blends in with its immediate surroundings. This property, or this proposal, accomplishes all of those goals. The point of form-based zoning, like we have in our character districts, is not to slavishly segregate different uses from one another. They just need to be compatible with one another, and I believe they are in this case. And the mass scale and appearance of this particular structure isn't changing at all, so it fits in with its surroundings. So the proposed use here would not in any way frustrate the purposes of the character zone and the use restrictions imposed on the character zone. So for all those reasons, we believe that this project is a good one for Portsmouth. It's a great one for this location, and we encourage you to approve the application.
All right. Thank you. So does anybody have any questions for the applicant? All right.
What's the status of seeking a conditional use permit for the parking?
So we, thank you for the question. We had a work session with the Technical Advisory Committee last Monday or Tuesday, I believe, and we've submitted a application for full formal TAC review today, as a matter of fact, and that will be before, ultimately, assuming we get variances we need, that will ultimately be decided by the planning board, I believe, in the middle of March. So it's in process.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you.
All right, we'll open the public comment. So is there anyone here that speak in favor of this application? Please come forward and state your name and your address, please.
My name is Chuck Doliak. I live at 365 Little Harbor Road, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I am one of the owners of the building right next to this one. at 82 Court Street, and I can tell you without doubt that having an inn in this location is a preferable use, rather than a residential house or rather than an office piece. And I'll tell you why. And you think you have a letter from my partner, Ralph Woodman, in the packet. In his youth, he saw this house saved from destruction when the First National Bank was going to tear it down. And the reason it was saved by my partners at that time was because it's a house of enormous historic importance. It has features of architecture that you don't see anywhere else except in historic buildings in the center of Portsmouth. The Langdon House, and the Moffat Ladd House are similar structures, but you don't see small structures like this that are as magnificent in terms of their interior architectural features, which I won't talk about. You have pictures of them. But the key to this is not only with that, but this was an inn. It was the Davenport Inn before it was moved. It's going back to its historic nature, and it was very famous for having very many famous people stay there during the court sessions. And as a result, it has this historic history that, you know, if it's an office, you're not going to know that. If it's a private residence, you're not going to know that. But if it's an inn, it's in their interest to talk about the architecture. It's in their interest to talk about the historic people that were there. And this building was so magnificent that in 1814, when the American Army was afraid that the British were going to burn down Portsmouth and station a 5,000-man army here, guess what building the general chose for his headquarters? Because of the magnificent architectural features, this house. In fact, it's the only house that has any relationship to the War of 1812 right now in Portsmouth. So what we have is a building that has enormous historic importance and a use of people who are going to use it as an inn to be able to tell people what that historic importance is. It is a selling point of Portsmouth, and it is the best way to preserve Portsmouth beyond making it a museum. So we heartily endorse this project. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else that'd like to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone that would like to speak? Is there anybody, no one on Zoom?
One person, but they have not
All right,
raised their hand.
got it. Anyone like to speak in opposition to this application?
We do have Jason Jenkins.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, but there's no video, I guess?
No video.
Sorry, yeah.
No video.
All right, I'll continue. So my name's Jason Jenkins. I'm direct abutter to this property. I wouldn't say I'm for or against this. It's a beautiful structure and great to have it in the neighborhood. Just a couple unanswered questions I had regarding the plans. First off, was I just curious if there was going to be like a dumpster anywhere or how they were going to handle the trash. And then the second thing was, it's kind of unclear on why the parking situation is not part of the this Board of Adjustment meeting. I guess you guys just touched on that a minute ago, but I didn't really understand. So if you guys could clarify that, because I mean, it looks like they want to go from like 2 spaces against the fence to 3, which is barely room for it. It is, you know, it's kind of tough with like snow removal and, you know, Mark Street, it's super narrow. I wasn't sure if like, you know, is the front of the building going to be the primary entrance, or, you know, will people be pulling around the back to check in? You know, and where are the other 6 cars going to park, or 5 cars, however many cars are going to be? So if you could just maybe get some more clarification on those questions. That's all. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So anybody else on Zoom, Peter?
No.
All right. So is there anyone to speak to, for, or against the application?
Well,
members of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Bob Mahefka. I live at 327 Sagamore Avenue. My client is Treadwell House, and I do represent them. I also own a property on the Hill in Portsmouth, so I thought I'd just maybe shed some light on a similar situation we had there. The Hill is it's a condominium complex of a dozen buildings on an acre of land adjacent to the Hilton Hotel. And a couple of years ago, the former Blue Mermaid restaurant was for sale, and the purchaser was proposing to put an inn in the facility and changing it from restaurant to inn. So as a condominium association, we had some questions about how will that affect parking, because we have limited parking there, and just how would it affect our immediate neighborhood. And one was, a bed and breakfast is allowed, so they could have put a bed and breakfast in there, but wanted a variance for an inn, which we supported because we didn't want a kitchen in there and, odors from food and that sort of thing, and more people in and out. So we thought it was more appropriate to have an inn as opposed to a bed and breakfast, and that's what the buyer was proposing, and we were on board with that. I will say after their project was completed, they, similar to this property here, it was about 5,000 square feet, and I believe it was 8 units. They renovated the building, looks great. All of our buildings are historic, so we were very concerned with that and what it would look like, and very pleased with the outcome. And I will say that in terms of parking and any kind of impact to our small neighborhood there's very little. In fact, it was much better than the restaurant had been in terms of impact, and I think it is much better than an office building would have been, with 20, 25 people in and out of there every day. So our experience there was very positive, continues to be very positive. So I just wanted to let you know about that situation, which is very similar to this one here. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
All right. Any questions?
And also the parking, the property owner, if for some reason we were out of parking or whatever, his tenants or clients would park in the parking garage or on the street. So, and there's never been an issue. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pafka. All right.
Again, Chris Mulligan for the applicant. Just to briefly address parking, again, we have a conditional use permit application that will need to be approved by the planning board. So the ultimate parking configuration hasn't been set yet, and but the abutter's comment is well taken. We understand it's a concern. The thing that I think is important to keep in mind, though, is that there are at least 3 municipal lots within, with significantly less than half a mile from this location. There are 2 parking garages that are within half a mile, and the applicant's principals own an apartment or a office building on Middle Street, which, if necessary, can be utilized for overflow and off-site parking either through a formal shared arrangement that the city imposes on us, or if they deem it to be part of a business necessity because their guests require it. So again, the city and the zoning ordinance recognizes and contemplates conditional use permits in this situation where there is not enough on-site available parking, and we'll have to convince the planning board that we can accommodate it. And we're prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Chris. Oh, sorry.
What about the dumpster question that Mr. Jenkins?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Eldridge. We don't anticipate, and we have no plan for a dumpster. There's no room for a dumpster there. We're going to utilize municipal services.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, final opportunity, 2 for or against. Seeing no one rise, close the public hearing. Board, thoughts, a motion on our 2 variances?
I always feel like I start things, but.
Go ahead.
Chase isn't here.
Oh, yeah, we don't have Chase anymore, or Chris, no, I'm just kidding. So, just some random thoughts, but I just want to explain to people watching and more listening, parking is not the purview of this board. I understand people's parking issues, problems with it. I am largely sympathetic. However, that is not something that this board can decide an application on, because it's in the purview of the planning board now under a conditional use permit. I also very much appreciate the information on history. Again, that's not something that's within our purview, although I appreciated the information from Chuck Doliak, and the building is lovely. I don't know if the interior will be not disturbed. They're putting bathrooms in, but again, I hope that's not true. But again, that's not within the purview of this board. I am going to support this application. For a variety of reasons. I think mostly is that the character district is really about streetscape and facades, and there's going to be no change to that. With this change in use, the use variance is normally very hard to get. I think less so in a character-based zoning district. I note that the Hotel Portsmouth is 2 doors away. That's also in the CD4 L1. I can't see that this change in use is going to have any impact on that area. I do note that, and this is something that I noticed when we were evaluating the variance for the Treadwell House that's on the corner of Court and Pleasant. The zoning going down Court is rather odd. There's a lot of municipal and civic lots. There is alternating CD4 L1 with CD5, which is a little strange if you're trying to bring into congruity of sort of streetscapes. So I think that to a certain extent there are special conditions for this property in that it's right on the edge of the CD5 where it would be allowed by right. And I do find that that's a little bit strange in terms of how the zoning was done down Court Street. But there is another inn within the CD4 L1, and I just don't see that this will have any, will change the character of the area. So.
Thank you. I agree with everything you said, and I think preserving the character of the building is certainly a laudable effort on the applicant's part. And I'd certainly be supporting the motion to grant these variances. So if anybody has anything else to say, or maybe somebody would like to make a motion, we could.
Did you make a motion?
I did not. I just spoke. I'll
Mr.
see if
McDonald.
somebody else wants to do it.
I'll move to approve the motion as, excuse me, as proposed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Do we have a second from anyone?
Second.
All righty. So, Mr. McDonald, your motion, please.
Well, I think the proponents have said everything that can be said in favor of this application, so I will depend on their complete competence to do it and not add to what's already complete.
All right, so Mr. Manny, your second, please.
Well, to follow up on what Mr. McDonald said, I agree this is a great reuse of the project. I appreciate Mr. Doliak and Attorney Mulligan's comments. Unfortunately, as Ms. Margeson said, the BOA does not have jurisdiction over parking. That was taken away. Might have a different issue right there and then, but no matter. I think it's a great reuse of a property. The character districts, I remember those meetings very well in how they changed from block to block and house to house. And as you said, the size inn and the sailmakers or loft are all in the same street. The variance is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. Substantial justice is done. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished. And literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. I believe all those criteria are met, and I will be supporting the motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manny. So with that, we will go to a vote. If no one else has any comments, Mr. Rossi?
For.
Okay. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margson?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Manny?
Yes.
The vice chair also votes yes, so it's unanimous. Motion's approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take a quick break.
Mr. Parrott, now that you're retaking the reins, we're a little past the time for our break, so
That was the
don't
first,
forget
that was
that.
the first thing I was going to mention.
All right.
Is everyone in favor of a 9 o'clock break?
Yes.
Yes.
We're adjourned. No, not adjourned, excuse me. We're on break.
Temporarily adjourned.
So close.
angry.
I did that.
The last item of the evening is under new business, item C, and the request, it reads as follows. The request of Mastoran, please correct my pronunciation, Restaurants, Inc., owner for the property located at 2255 Lafayette Road, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing Burger King and construct a 5,555 square foot convenience store with drive-through and fueling island, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.5B 33.20 to allow 0% front lot line build-out where 75% is required. 2, a variance from section 10.5B 22.40 to allow a building to be constructed outside of the 70 to 90-foot setback from the center line of Lafayette Road. 3, a variance from section 10.1113.20 to allow parking to be located between a principal building and a street. 4, a variance from section 10.1114.31 to allow more than one driveway. 5, a variance from section 10.835.32 to allow a bypass lane for, for a drive-through to be set back 24 feet from a lot line where 30 feet is required. 6, a variance from section 10.1251.20 to allow a 160 square foot freestanding sign where 100 square feet is the maximum allowed. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 272, Lot 3, and lies within the Gateway Corridor G1 district. Who speaks in favor of this proposal, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Attorney John Boson. I represent the applicant. We're joined tonight by Brad Pernoff from Common Man Restaurants and project engineer Nicole Duquette from GPI. The proposal before you seeks to redevelop the former Burger King building located at 2255 Lafayette Road into a Common Man roadside convenience store with an Irving gas station. On site will be 5,550 square feet of retail food service space with a drive-through and a retail fueling area, with 5 fuel dispenser canopies, dispenser islands with an overhead canopy, along with associated parking, travel lanes, and other improvements as shown in the plan. Provide you with a handout for some visual aids, and I'd like to have Brad Pernoff come to the podium and just give you a really high-level overview of the project. I think it'll help put this in perspective. Then Nicole's going to come up and talk you a little bit through the site plan, and I'll come back up and go through the zoning criteria. So, Brad?
Good evening, Brad Pernoff for the record. I'm the managing partner of the Common Man Roadside. Our brand, the Common Man Roadside, we're an offshoot of the Common Man family of restaurants. It's been operating in New Hampshire for about 50 years. In 2014, we opened the first Common Man Roadside at the Hooksett Welcome Centers that we redeveloped through a partnership with the New Hampshire Department of Transportation. Through the success of that concept, we created a smaller version that you see in front of you. It's anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. We opened our first store in Plymouth in 2019, and we opened a second location in Manchester in 2020. We're here tonight to seek approvals for our project here in Portsmouth, and we have others planned in Epsom and Concord. We're a 5,500 square foot market and deli. A major portion or component of our offering is made to order food service, which is coming from our restaurant heritage and background. So when you think of a traditional convenience store and gas station, you might not think of what we have here to offer. So we felt like this packet would be important. These are pictures from a publication that was done on our Manchester store about a year ago. And this is what we would be building here in Portsmouth with a couple tweaks. In Manchester, we had to eliminate some of the indoor dining due to the lot configuration constraints. On the next page, you can see our facade. We use a stone facade. Similar to our restaurants, we want to have a barn aesthetic and appeal. Inside the store, you can see the great lengths we take to make a new building look old. That's all reclaimed barn board that we find, rusted corrugated metal roofing, and we go through great lengths to do that. The last page is a floor plan, and I just want to point out the living room concept. We have a fireplace in there, couches, and we view this as more than a convenience store. It's really a deli, and it's one of our restaurants focusing on real food real fast. We're excited about this project. We think this is a great location, and we are looking forward to coming back to Portsmouth. So I'm going to turn everything over to Nicole now, and she can go through our site plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Nicole Duquette from GPI. I know it's getting late, so I'll go really fast. So the existing site, you probably all know about it. It's Burger King right across from Water Country. The existing building is almost 5,000 square feet. It's 4,770 square feet. There is 73 parking spaces on that lot, which is kind of a lot for that use, and that's why they have so much pavement on that site. The existing building, which this will come into play later on, is 151 feet from the center line of Lafayette Road. So the existing building does not conform with today's regulations as well. And the other thing to mention is that the existing development has like a 1 foot separation to the wetlands, the major wetlands in the back. So we did, as part of this, we do need to get a CUP, a conditional use permit with the Conservation Commission. So we did meet with them conceptually a couple of months ago. We also met conceptually with the Technical Advisory Committee and had a scoping meeting with DOT to try to really do our homework before we came before you today. Some of the things that came up, the proposed development, as mentioned, is a 5,555 square foot convenience store / sandwich shop or deli with a drive-through. So we are asking for a drive-through in this location as well. And then it has the 5 fuel dispenser islands or 10 fueling locations. We are reducing the parking spaces to 25 spaces. We are allowed to count the parking spaces at the pumps. And I know you don't deal with spaces, but this is how some of the ways that we're reducing the pavement on this lot. The canopy itself, and I figured out how to use this tool right before it was good that you took a break. So I could figure out, and watch, it's not going to work.
I think if you hold the button.
Yeah, I am. Oh, wrong button. I did practice this, I swear. All right, so this canopy edge is 120 feet off the center line of Lafayette Road. So the existing building is right behind, and this red dot or pink dot is really wide. I'm just going to go there and point to it. Right there. So that is the edge of the existing building. So our existing building, the Burger King building, is going to be behind where we would have the canopy in the future. The convenience store / deli is about 203 feet from the center line of Lafayette Road. There was some discussion back and forth whether or not the canopy was the principal structure or the convenience store was the principal structure. If there is a supplemental regulation for the gas station use, and the gas station use does list the convenience store as an accessory to the gas station. However, I do see the ambiguity because this isn't just a convenience store, it is a convenience store and deli shop. But if the canopy was deemed the principal structure, the canopy would be more conforming than the existing structure. And the other thing is we are not proposing any spaces to the front of that canopy or to the side of the canopy. The only spaces, the customer spaces, are actually located right in front of our storefront right here. And then we have spaces back here, which I'll get to a little bit. So with the Conservation Commission, this plan has been revised several times. With the Conservation Commission, they're concerned, you've got the wetland, which comes down along here. This finger right here is a swale between the two properties, and it basically is a swale for DOT. The DOT has a culvert that discharges right there, and that goes right into the main section of the wetlands back here. So one thing that the Conservation Commission had asked us to do, we did have parking spaces. We did have parking spaces in this area here. We have removed those and put some in back. The other thing we did is we took the underground storage tanks that were located on this side and pushed them to the other side, further away from the wetland, as far away from the wetland as we could get them. The loading area, one of the things that they wanted to do is get the pavement edge as far away from the main portion of the wetland as they could. So we took the loading area that was back here before and we moved it over to the side. That allowed the pavement edge and the development footprint to be moved away from the wetland. So these spaces back here, the 11 spaces back here, are actual dual purpose spaces. In the future, the Common Man Roadside would like to have the ability to put EV charging stations back there. So that's another green building initiative that the Common Man Roadside is looking into. The other thing I want to mention too is our stormwater. Right now, Burger King's pavement just sheet flows right into that wetland. There's no treatment whatsoever. So with this development, we are proposing both pre-treatment and treatment devices to treat the stormwater before it is released into the wetland. So we feel that, it is important, especially for this site with such a large wetland in back. Even though it's not a prime wetland, it is a significant wetland, and we need to protect it as much as possible. The other thing I want to mention too is with DOT, we did have the scoping meeting, and their big comment was that they wanted to keep these driveways exactly the way they were with, it's currently an entrance driveway only and an exit driveway only. So that was very important to them to keep those same exact locations and the same traffic flow. With that being said, I think I'm all set. I'll hand it back over to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. The city tax records indicate that the existing building was built in 1990. Unlike the inn, there's no historical significance here. But as a result, it's not easily adapted to other uses. So any project on this property is going to require some relief from this board. So with the background that we've provided, I'd like to go through the zoning criteria necessary for you to grant the requested variances. First, granting the requested variances will not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, nor contrary to the public interest. And the test here is whether or not the variances being granted would substantially alter the characteristics of the neighborhood, threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the public. In this case, if you grant the variances, there won't really be any change to the essential characteristics of the neighborhood, nor will any public health, safety, or welfare be threatened. The property is surrounded by similar and compatible commercial uses within the gateway zone, and the uses being proposed here are permitted by right. As a result, the existing built environment on this site, or as it exists now, the existing building on this site is grossly non-compliant with the ordinance provisions that we seek relief from tonight. And the project as proposed will bring the property line into closer compliance and will greatly improve the existing impacts on the wetland buffer. So the health, safety, and welfare of the public will not be threatened, nor will the essential characteristics of the neighborhood change in any way as a result of the either whether it be the virtue of the signs being proposed or the relief being requested. This project will also require a full site review by the planning board, so the interests of the public will be further protected. Next, substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. And the test here requires the board to conduct a balancing test. If the hardship upon the applicant outweighs any benefit to the general public in denying the variance, then substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. Here, the existing configuration of building, parking, and travel lanes are more non-compliant than the applicant proposed replacements, and the project will improve the environmental impact of this site. The property as it exists is non-conforming as to the front lot line build-out and the Lafayette Road setback requirements. It already has 2 driveways and has parking between the principal structure and the roadway. So the proposal will not change those nonconformities, so there's no benefit to the public that's not outweighed by a loss to the applicant if these variances were granted. Next, the value of surrounding properties will not be diminished by the granting of the variances. The surrounding properties in the vicinity will not be negatively affected in any way by the relief that we seek tonight. The property as it exists is already non-conforming as to the front lot line build-out and the Lafayette Road setback requirements, driveway and parking requirements as well. So, and as you can see from the plans, there's a very thoughtful, tasteful building that's being proposed and much more desirable than was presently there. So we do not believe that surrounding properties will be negatively impacted in any way. Also, this is a commercial use that is permitted and it's compatible with the surrounding uses. Next, there are special conditions associated with the property that prevent the proper enjoyment of the property in the strict terms of the ordinance and thus constitute unnecessary hardship. This property, as you can see from the plan, it is unique. We are burdened by wetlands in the southwest corner, and the wetlands buffer bisects the lot. Existing structures, the pavements, and the improvements already are significantly non-conforming to the current ordinance. So these special conditions of the property constitute hardship that our redevelopment will bring into closer compliance and will further protect the wetlands. Also, the use here is reasonable. It's permitted within this district and it's compatible with other surrounding retail and commercial uses. And lastly, there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance as it's applied to this particular property. Front lot line build-out requirements would be met if the principal retail structure was used for measurement instead of the canopy, as Nicole had mentioned. There is no proposed parking between the gas pumps and the canopy and the road, and the secondary driveway is desirable to maintain safe and efficient navigation as well as access to and from the site. And as Nicole mentioned, we've had a favorable scoping meeting with DOT. So the purpose of the sign ordinance is to maintain and enhance character of the city's commercial districts and to protect the public from hazardous and distracting displays. What's being proposed, the new sign, does nothing to distract from the character of the district, and there's nothing hazardous or distracting about it. It's also consistent in square footage size with the existing Burger King sign, so there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of those restrictions and their application to this property. So for all those reasons, we do believe the variance criteria are met, and myself and my team are happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions from the board at this point? No? No, apparently not. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Who else would like to speak in favor of this proposal? Anybody else want to address the board and speak in favor? Last call? Last call? No? Okay. Is anyone present? No.
We have no one.
No one on the Zoom? Okay. Is anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? Anybody? None, still none on the Zoom?
No.
Okay. Apparently not. Last call will be 2 for or against. Any speakers? 2 for or against? Any at all? Any at all? None? Seeing none, we'll, okay, the public hearing is closed. We've heard the proposal. Board, what's your pleasure? Does anybody want to open up the discussion, or?
Well, I'd like to ask a question of you, really, and that is that
Sure.
the amongst the variances that are needed, there would be a variance needed for the 160-foot gross sign area as a variance to 10.1251.2 as well as these other listed up here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And can that be considered separately from the other variances?
Any way you wish to, or anybody wishes to craft a proposal, certainly. Yes. We can take the variances individually as a group, or in a couple at a time. It doesn't make any difference. Whatever anyone wishes to do. Any
I would propose.
Any motions?
I would propose that we take the variance for the sign separately from the grouping of the rest of the variances.
All right. Do I sense a motion on the rest of the variances?
Not from me, because I'm terrible
Not
at
from
wording
you?
them.
Okay. Okay.
That's why we need Chris.
Does anybody feel moved to move it? No?
I'm not making a motion, but
Okay.
it's very rare for me that I come here and look at 6 variance requests, and that's a lot
It
in one
is a lot.
request.
Yes.
And yet I don't think there's anything about this that isn't perfectly suited for this location. I mean, this is what that part of Lafayette Road is. And so even with the sign variance, I don't really have any real concerns about this, but I guess I would want to hear what
Okay.
other people have to say.
Anybody else have a thought? Mr. Mantle?
Well-
And then Mr. McDonald. Yeah.
To Ms. Eldridge's point is that the reason they need 6 variances is because the zoning has changed on Lafayette Road. It went from whatever the zoning was before to Gateway to promote, lack of a better term, more pedestrian-friendly buildings, because we have no ability to control Lafayette Road. It's a federal highway. But, as studies have shown, if you push buildings and pedestrians closer to the roadway, drivers tend to slow down. So that was the purpose of all of the zoning changes in Gateway zoning. I don't agree with all of them, but that was the purpose of the changes. There have already been a few buildings on Lafayette Road that conform to that zoning, so, for what it's worth.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Yeah, and the idea was that it looks better to have buildings closer to the front and not massive parking lots and then a building way in
It
the
depends on
back.
what you like, definitely.
It depends what you like. Yeah, it is very much a personal preference. That's true. Mr. McDonald.
I was just going to agree with Ms. Eldridge.
Okay.
I think there's never going to be a better use for that scrap land there than a drive-through gas station restaurant combination. I think it's the right use for the land, and the use that was there kind of died a natural economic death, I think. And so the opportunity for successful business is high.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Lee?
I just wonder if we can get some clarification on the sign issue. Is that going to be, would that be one sign or multiple signs that are internally lit? I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around the size of this sign, if it's one
They had a
sign.
proposal in their packet.
It's in the.
Yeah, that was in the packet. I believe it, well, I shouldn't say, I believe it's one sign.
Oh, yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
So-called freestanding sign.
Pretty much the size of
Yeah.
the other sign.
It is a big sign.
Maybe too big.
I would like to make a motion that the variance for the increase sign size against ordinance 10.1251.2 be denied on the basis that it fails to meet the criteria of imposing an unnecessary hardship on the applicant.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? No? Apparently not. Okay. Does someone have an alternate motion? See, now that we've broken the ice on motions. Anybody have an?
I think my only issue is, I think I would rather take the main ordinance relief first, rather than start with the sign ordinance.
All right.
That would be, so.
Do I sense a motion?
I made too many motions now.
Just outside.
Six is a lot, but
We're
it's
still waiting for you.
required, yeah. All are required. Yeah.
All right, well, to move things along, I'll move to approve the first group of ordinances or applications.
Which would be specifically,
Back to where we are.
numbers, what?
110.533320 through 10.835.32.
So one on the,
Front lot line
one,
build
the
out.
first
Building-
ordinance is one, your motion is to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, is that correct?
Okay, close enough.
Okay. Because number 6 is the
Signed.
sign. Okay, so Mr. Lee's motion is to approve ordinances 1 through 5, okay? Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Eldridge. Your motion, Mr. Lee.
All right. Well, taking the first two together, I don't think any of these variances requests are contrary to the public interest, and they certainly observe the spirit of the ordinance. You know, the existing building pretty much has everything that's listed here now, except the proximity to the road, and there's two driveways there now. There's going to be a building canopy for the gas pumps, which will be closer to the road, but I don't, to quote one of our former chairmen, I don't have any particular heartburn about that. So those first two are satisfied. I think substantial justice is done here. You know, again, you apply the balancing act test. There's no, the benefit to the applicant is not outweighed by any harm to the general public, so that's satisfied. The values of surrounding properties are not diminished. This is a heavily commercial zone in all directions, you know, with Water Country across the street, an auto parts store on one side, and another commercial enterprise on the other side. So, you know, nothing to diminish the value of surrounding properties. It'll probably enhance their value. Literal enforcement of this ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship because of special conditions of the property, that is, the existing huge amount of pavement that's there now that's apparently draining directly into the wetlands. Reconfiguring that with a reduced pavement area would solve that problem. But because of these special conditions, you can't reasonably use the property in strict conformance with the ordinance because it's non-conforming already. Reconfiguring and redoing the existing site will make it less non-conforming. So for those reasons, I move to approve the application.
Thank you. And you, second, Ms. Eldridge?
I have nothing to add.
Thank you.
Well said.
Okay. We'll take a vote on this motion, and then we'll deal with the sign ordinance variance number 6. Okay. I'm going to do some tricky bean counting. Excuse me. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
No,
Oh, okay,
that's why I didn't make the motion.
okay, okay. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Yes. And Mr. Mannell?
No.
No. And and I vote yes. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 to 2.
5. Yep, okay. So that's carried. That leaves the issue of the signs. Who wants to address the sign? I assume the concern is over the size, because that's all that's being asked for is the size.
That's my concern.
Okay. Okay. The, as we all know, the variance, the ordinance requires, in this situation, no more than 100 square feet, and the request is for 160 square feet. So, does someone have a motion with an alternate size in mind, or something like that? Better pass something. They're entitled to a sign, obviously. Ms. Eldridge?
I would move to approve the sign the way it is. I think that
right.
given the size of this property and the other signs along Lafayette Road, that it seems appropriate to me. And I think attracting attention on that road with all of the lights and all of the traffic is a hardship and requires something maybe a little larger than life. So I don't think it's affecting any property values. I don't think that it is against the public interest. I think it will make it easier. I should be waiting for a second, shouldn't I?
No, you're still
Keep
explaining,
going.
that's fine.
Okay. I think it observes the spirit of the ordinance. I don't usually make motion. For the reasons that I said, it would do substantial justice. It wouldn't take from the public or from surrounding businesses, and it certainly won't diminish the value of surrounding properties. So for that, and given the competition for attention on this roadway, I would approve that sign.
Thank you for the motion. Is there a second to Ms. Eldridge's motion? Second? Anybody? Second?
Second.
Second? Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Okay. Do you wish to address it?
No, I think Ms. Eldridge said everything that needs to be said and said it well.
All right, thank you. All right. Anything further before we take a vote on the motion, which is to approve the sign as presented at 160 square feet? And I will just add the obvious, that there's no moving parts to it, because that's a requirement. Doesn't need to be said. It's a standing requirement, just for everybody's information, though.
I have a question.
No flashing lights.
I noted on the canopy, the word Irving appears there as well. Would that be considered part of a sign, or not the sign, but the signage, the gross signage?
Not for, it wouldn't count towards this freestanding sign.
Okay.
Which they're requesting. I mean, it is signage, but it's separate.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stiff. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Any need for further discussion? Okay, let's take a vote on the motion. Again, is to approve the sign as presented in the application at 160 square feet. Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
Okay. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Margerson?
No.
Okay. Mr. McDonald?
No.
Okay. Mr. Mantle?
No.
Okay. And doesn't matter, but I'm going to vote yes. Okay. We need another. In that case, that motion failed. Does someone have another motion? Or
Is
that-
another motion necessary? I mean, if the variance is
Yes,
not...
yes, it
They
is.
need to have
Yes,
something.
yes, because that's a negative motion.
That was
so-
a motion to approve.
That was, right. So we need another motion
Motion to deny.
of some kind.
I move to deny the request for a variance from ordinance 10.1251.2 on the basis that, well, let's see, for a 160 square foot sign, and instead to approve a 100 square foot sign as guided by the ordinance, on the basis that having that sign would not present a undue hardship, so it fails to meet that test.
Okay, the motion is to approve a freestanding sign at 100 square feet. Okay,
Okay, yeah, we can say it that way.
Well,
is that what you
I
mean?
think to deny the request for because 100 square foot would be.
Doesn't
Yeah,
require...
exactly,
doesn't
that's
require
right.
variance,
Yeah, it doesn't need a
Right,
variance.
right. Yep.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Lee.
Applicant's kind of frantically
yeah, I
waving
know.
his hand. It'd be appropriate to
I
listen.
know,
to-
we've closed the meeting, but by vote, is everyone agreed that even though we've closed the public hearing, that the applicant can speak?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, agreed, okay, yes. You're welcome.
Appreciate that, and I'll make it very brief. Peter, is it possible you could bring up the page with the sign? I just wanted to explain what's driving the size, and that might help clarify. This section right here, 32 square feet. So one option, and the existing Burger King sign is 160, and that is 160, but 32 square feet is that area below that's,
Base.
yeah, the base, thank you. We could pile on that, and that would reduce that size sign by 32 square feet. You know, it's obvious we have to get the sign off the ground so there's enough room for the snow. So if we put the pylons, we'd reduce that, except it's not as attractive. We think it's more attractive with, you know, with the base, the decorative base. But that would be an option we'd be willing to consider as a, you know, as a condition, perhaps we reduce that, put the base.
Just to make sure I'm clear on what this is. So is the 160 square feet the gross area of the whole sign,
Yes.
including everything else?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So what you pointed out there, the bottom part, is actually didn't have any words or anything on it?
Right,
It's just
it's
the base.
counted towards the calculation.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps or not.
So it does, and instead of 160 square feet, you're more like 130 square feet.
Right.
With the area around that, so I feel a little, you know, that 160 square feet's almost twice what's allowed, so 130 is getting a little closer than if you kind of subtract out some of these other areas around here where the words are stuck on.
Yeah, I think we could still have an attractive sign if we, with 130 square feet. Yeah. So as a condition, we could live with that.
We can not have the stone facade on the bottom and reduce the square footage from 160 by 32 square feet, and you would have two poles on each sign, on each side that would be visible. We felt from our branding and everything that we bring to these projects, this is far more aesthetically pleasing, but it
I
is
agree.
costing
I
you
don't have a
32
particular
square
problem
feet.
with the stonage on the bottom. I just didn't understand that what you're talking about was the whole sign.
Yeah, the Irving and the Common Man are much smaller than even 130 square feet. A majority of what's being calculated is the stone facade, just by the way your ordinance reads.
Well, just kind of for context on this, we approved for the West End Yards, a sign area of 300 square feet, because about 200 of it was a big giant frame that said nothing that went around it. So I feel a little better about the way this is configured now, because it's really not, you're not 160 square feet of sign, it's 160 square feet of base with words stuck on it.
So the display area is like 60 square feet.
Got it.
The actual colored part, yeah.
Right, the Irving.
Right, okay. Okay, so where are we? Is anyone interested in
Is it double jeopardy?
Yeah. The pedestal business or as it appears, or 100 square feet?
Based on the new information, I'd make a motion to approve it as presented.
Well, there was a motion.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Rossi, but
Yeah, okay, don't
we
get-
never got a second, so I
No.
don't know.
Yeah,
No, so-
I could withdraw,
so
I could withdraw
It went
that
away,
motion.
yeah, because he didn't get a second, yeah. Okay, Mr. Lee, restate it just please for the
I would
record.
move to approve the application for the sign as presented.
Okay, is there a second to that motion now? No? No? Okay, we need something.
Yes.
Okay, yes, there is, Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Yes?
You can always vote
Okay.
against it.
Okay. So in other words, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Explain your motion,
Oh,
please.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, the proposal, as I understand it, is to make it exactly as it
That's correct,
appears.
as presented and advertised, to quote Mr. Mulligan.
As shown,
former
with a
member.
solid
Yep.
pedestal, whatever you want to say, the
Right,
the lower part of it.
Correct. And based on the new information we've received and my better understanding of it, I now believe that this variance is not contrary to the public interest. The spirit, definitely observe the spirit of the ordinance, because it's really not 160 square feet of words, it's 160 square feet of that the words reside on, so that makes it, the total context better in my mind. I believe substantial justice is done because the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by any harm to the general public or any other individual. I think having a sign, this is actually going to be a pretty attractive sign, I think. So again, because it's in a commercial zone, I don't see that there will be any diminution of values of surrounding properties because they're all commercial and they all have signs. And the unnecessary hardship here is that the applicant, let's see, because again, the special conditions of the property cause the proposed use to be reasonable and it doesn't alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do we have a section to that motion? Yes, we did, Ms.
It was
Eldridge.
me,
And
and I
do
have
you have any
nothing-
additional comments? No?
No, I
No,
think I
you're
did
so-
those.
You're all set? Okay. All right. In that case, we're ready for a motion. The motion is to approve it as presented, and that includes the sign as it's shown here in the graphic, and with the, nothing added to the wording, and just as it is, so. And no moving parts. So, let's take a vote on the motion. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
No.
No. Ms. Eldridge?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
All right. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Mannell?
No.
No? Okay. And I vote yes, so. So, it looks like it's carried. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So up to me to the sign and no building.
5 to 2. Yep. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your, thank you all for your patience.
At least I'm not consistent.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Please do. That sounds like one. Is there a,
And make a motion to adjourn.
thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Lee's got it. Yes, thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Yeah.